For Stacy Feldman, family was everything. The youngest of three sisters, she had always dreamed of becoming a wife and mother. By the age of 45, it seemed she had it all. A beautiful home in Denver, Colorado, 2 young children, and a marriage to Robert Feldman. But on the morning of March 1, 2015, just hours after confronting her husband about an affair, Stacy was found dead in the bathroom. What first appeared to be a tragic accident would, after 7 long years, be revealed as something far darker. Stacy Feldman grew up in Muncie, Indiana, the youngest of 3 sisters. Her sister, Susan Altman, would later recall that Stacy had been special from the very beginning. Stacy is the youngest child in the family, Daddy's little girl. Those who knew Stacy remembered her as someone who radiated joy. Susan described her as girly, full of life, someone who adored the color pink and could light up any room. But more than anything, Stacy had a deep passion for helping others and a strong commitment to her community. As she entered her 32nd, Stacy watched her friends get married and start families while she remained single. Everything changed when Stacy met Robert Feldman, known to friends as Bob, charismatic and 14 years older. Bob quickly won her heart. To Stacy, Bob seemed to be everything she had been waiting for in a partner. They married in 2005 at the Ritz-Carlton in Montreal, Canada, in what Stacy described as the wedding of her dreams. She even wore a tiara, convinced she had finally found her happily ever after. Soon after, they settled in suburban Denver, welcomed a daughter and later a son. From the outside, the Feldmans seemed to have the perfect life. Stacy threw herself into motherhood and community work, eventually becoming president of the parent-teacher organization at Southmore Elementary School, where her children attended. She also dedicated her time to Partners Seeking a Cure, a nonprofit that funds research into liver disease. But behind the picture-perfect facade, cracks began to show. Bob was a chronically underperforming salesman who struggled to support his family. As a result, Stacy, who had long dreamed of being a stay-at-home mother, was forced to work to help make ends meet. Even more troubling was Bob's controlling nature. The house and all credit cards were in his name, leaving Stacy financially dependent. He would threaten that if she ever left him, he would take the children and leave her with nothing. Friends and family began to recognize these patterns of financial and emotional control. Then came the issue of Bob's infidelity. Throughout their 10-year marriage, Bob repeatedly cheated, creating profiles on dating apps and websites under fake names. He used aliases, sometimes claiming to be a divorced conservative Jew in his mid-50s, other times presenting himself as a reformed Jew in his mid-40s. Despite these betrayals, Stacy fought to hold the marriage together. She had invested everything into the relationship and the family they had built, but by early 2015, it was clear the marriage was unraveling, and those closest to Stacy could see she was struggling. What no one could have foreseen was just how deadly Bob's latest affair would become. In February 2015, Bob was active on Tinder under the alias Robert Wolf. That's where he met Susan McBride. From the start, Bob lied to Susan, claiming he was divorced and that his ex-wife was absent from their children's lives. Their first date went smoothly, and Susan later testified it was just a very easy, friendly conversation. But when Susan tried to look up Bob online under the names he had given her, she couldn't find a trace of him. Something felt off. She tried to end things, but Bob persuaded her to give him another chance, claiming he had a stalker, and that was why he used aliases online. He also reassured her that he was separated from his wife. Against her better judgment, Susan decided to believe him. On February 26, 2015, Bob came over to Susan's house for dinner. After talking for hours, they ended up having intimate, but immediately afterward, Bob's behavior raised red flags. He cancelled their plans for the weekend and started pulling away. Susan's suspicions returned, and this time, she was determined to uncover the truth, digging deeper online. Susan finally found references to Stacy Feldman through the Southmore Elementary School website, where Stacy was listed as the PTO president. It was then that Susan realized Bob had been lying. He wasn't divorced at all, but married with 2 young children. Susan now faced a tough choice: walk away quietly or reach out to Stacy and tell her the truth. In the end, she chose honesty, even though it meant admitting her own role in the affair. On the morning of March 1, 2015, at 6:20 a.m., Susan sent Stacy an email. In it, she explained how she had met Bob on Tinder, that he had told her he was separated, and that she felt Stacy deserved to know the truth. Susan's email was straightforward, yet compassionate. She even attached copies of her text exchanges with Bob as proof. What happened after would become pivotal in the case against Bob. Just before 9 o'clock a.m., Stacy called Susan. Despite learning about Bob's betrayal, Stacy stayed calm throughout their 5-minute conversation. Susan remembered her as so sweet and kind. She wasn't angry. Stacy admitted this wasn't the first time Bob had cheated, but then she said something that prosecutors would later highlight as crucial evidence: that she was done with him. It, spoken just hours before her death, gave investigators a clear motive for murder. That Sunday morning began like any other for the Feldmans. Bob dropped the children off at Temple Sinai for religious school at around 8:30 a.m. The plan was for Stacy to pick them up at noon and take them to the Purim Carnival being held there around 10 o'clock a.m. Stacy sent her final text message to a friend, mentioning she was supposed to pick up the kids from religious school at noon and take them to a Purim Carnival. But when noon came and went, with no sign of Stacy, the school staff tried calling her phone, no answer. They eventually called Bob to ask if someone else was coming for the children. Bob said he'd pick them up, but when 12:45 p.m. arrived and he still hadn't shown, the staff called again. This time, Bob gave a different story. He thought a family friend was collecting them. Finally, at 1:05 p.m., Bob arrived. Teachers noticed that he looked disheveled and was acting curt, very unlike his usual self. Instead of bringing the kids home, he took them to the carnival and later to a bike shop. It wasn't until around 3 o'clock p.m. that Bob and the children returned home. His daughter, excited, wanted to show Stacy the prizes she'd won. But when they entered the house, Bob told the girl to hang her coat downstairs, preventing her from going upstairs to see her mother. The next sequence of events unfolded in a 911 call that would later become a centerpiece of the investigation and trial. In the recording, Bob can be heard frantically speaking to the operator. He explained that he had found Stacy unconscious in the shower with the water running, claimed he pulled her out and was performing CPR while waiting for paramedics. But almost immediately, inconsistencies in his story began to surface. First responders arriving at the scene found the bathroom floor completely dry, an odd detail, given Bob's claim that he had removed Stacy from a running shower. The call itself raised further questions. Though Bob insisted he was performing CPR, investigators later noted that no sounds of chest compressions or rescue breaths could be heard on the recording. Instead, there were noises of a toilet flushing and objects being moved, suggesting Bob may have been staging the scene rather than trying to save his wife's life. The ambulance arrived just minutes later, but it was too late. Stacy was pronounced dead in the home. Among the first detectives on scene was Randy Dennison, who immediately found Bob's demeanor suspicious. According to the arrest affidavit, Bob acted confused and shocked, but in a way that seemed exaggerated, as though he were performing for effect. Firefighters on scene had a similar reaction, describing Bob as overly dramatic and oddly uncooperative, behavior that did not match that of a grieving spouse. Still, with no clear evidence of foul play, Stacy's death initially appeared to be the result of a tragic household accident. Only an autopsy could determine otherwise. On March 2, 2015, the very next day, Stacy's autopsy was performed. Their findings were astonishing. Stacy had suffered more than 80 injuries, including bruises, abrasions, hemorrhages, and even a chipped tooth. She also had petechial hemorrhages in her eyes, tiny blood vessel bursts, often associated with strangulation or suffocation. However, despite the serious injuries, investigators were unable to determine the exact cause of death. The cause and manner were officially ruled undetermined, leaving the case stalled for years and allowing Bob to remain free. Meanwhile, Bob's behavior continued to raise red flags. In police interviews, he gave conflicting accounts of his movements that day. At first, he claimed he left for work, went to the gym, and met a colleague at a bus depot where he checked advertising on buses. Later, however, his story shifted. He told detectives that Stacy had been tired and asleep when he left the house with the children around 8:30 a.m. to take them to Temple Sinai. He claimed he returned around noon, called out to her but got no response, changed clothes in the laundry room, tidied the garage after a shelf had fallen, then went to a nearby park to exercise. Other statements he made also proved false. He told police that Stacy had eaten marijuana edibles the night before, but toxicology showed no trace of them in her system. He also claimed she had been unwell and missed work in the days leading up to her death. Another assertion that was not supported by evidence, adding to the suspicion, was Bob's financial gain. Just months after Stacy's death, he collected $750,000 from a life insurance policy that had been taken out on her 5 years earlier. Curiously, while Stacy's life was heavily insured, Bob had no comparable policy on his own life, a glaring imbalance that prosecutors would later argue pointed to premeditation. The investigation also uncovered Bob's long-running pattern of infidelity. Detectives learned that he maintained profiles on numerous dating apps and websites, often under fake names and with contradictory personal details. One especially disturbing case involved a woman named Stephanie Geldman. She had met Bob at a grief support group where he falsely claimed Stacy had died of cancer. Believing his story, she agreed to meet him, but during what she thought was an innocent date, Bob abused her at his home. Despite all these red flags, the undetermined ruling on Stacy's death certificate meant prosecutors didn't yet have enough to file murder charges. The case seemed stalled, drifting toward being forgotten, but Stacy's family, especially her sister, Susan Altman, refused to let that happen. To them, this was no accident. Susan was certain Bob had killed Stacy, and she was determined to prove it. Susan's instincts were immediate and unwavering. Living in the Boston area at the time, Susan got a Sunday afternoon call from her father. She was preparing to take one of her children to a sporting event when her daughter answered the phone. Susan initially replied that she was busy, but her daughter insisted she take the call. When Susan picked up, her father's words left her stunned. "Stacy's dead." For a split second, Susan thought it had to be a car accident. But when her father explained that Stacy had supposedly slipped in the shower, Susan's mind immediately went elsewhere. Her first reaction, she later told the Intermountain Jewish News, was to think Bob had killed Stacy. As months dragged on and the investigation stalled, Susan refused to stand by. She had seen Bob's behavior for years, the way he manipulated and controlled Stacy through money, keeping all accounts and assets in his name. She knew about his constant cheating, his threats to take the children if Stacy ever tried to leave. To Susan, Bob wasn't just dishonest, He was calculated. She even remembered how he would pull petty scams, like bringing broken suitcases to airports and demanding airlines replace them with brand new ones. In her opinion, he was a man who always looked for an unethical shortcut to make easy money. But Susan also knew that her suspicion alone wasn't enough. To hold Bob accountable, she needed experts, evidence, and allies. That breakthrough came nearly 2 years later, during a conversation with a relative who worked as a psychologist. As Susan described the circumstances of Stacy's death and her troubled marriage, the psychologist immediately recognized the signs of domestic violence that had escalated to lethal force. They urged Susan to contact the Strangulation Prevention Training Institute, an organization that specializes in cases that might be misclassified as accidents or self-harm. Susan wasted no time. Through the institute, she was connected with Detective Randy Dennison, the original investigator who had always suspected Bob but lacked the specialized expertise to prove it. The institute then brought in Dr. Bill Smock, a nationally recognized expert in strangulation and forensic medicine. Dr. Smock had decades of experience as an ER physician and forensic consultant, with a track record of securing convictions in every strangulation case he consulted on. Dr. Smock brought exactly the knowledge Susan had been searching for. Susan's relentless persistence had finally connected Stacy's case with the experts who could uncover the truth and bring Bob Feldman one step closer to justice. Meanwhile, another crucial piece of the puzzle was about to fall into place. Susan McBride, the woman who had revealed Bob's affair to Stacy, was on the verge of a discovery that would change everything. In June 2015, just 3 months after Stacy died, McBride found herself enduring yet another disappointing online date. The experience reminded her of her encounter with Bob, and she began to wonder what had happened to his marriage. Curious, she searched online to see if Bob and Stacy had divorced, as he had once claimed they would. Instead of divorce records, she stumbled upon something that made her physically ill. Stacy Feldman's obituary, dated March 1, 2015, the exact day McBride had told her about the affair. Shaken, McBride immediately contacted the Denver Police Department and spoke with Detective Randy Dennison. She shared everything she knew: her affair with Bob, the lies he had told, and the phone call with Stacy on the morning of her death. For investigators, this was the breakthrough that Stacy's sister, Susan Altman, had long hoped for. At last, there was a motive. Bob had killed Stacy after she discovered his affair and was preparing to leave him. Still, proving it was murder would require expert analysis. And that's when Dr. Bill Smock entered the case. When Dr. Smock agreed to review Stacy Feldman's death in 2017. Nearly 3 years after the incident, he brought with him decades of experience uncovering concealed homicides. A nationally recognized expert in strangulation and domestic violence cases, he knew exactly what to look for in deaths staged to appear accidental. Over the course of several months, Dr. Smock pored over every detail: the autopsy report, toxicology results, and hundreds of photographs taken both at the scene and during the autopsy. What he found painted a horrifying picture of Stacy's final moments. More than 80 injuries covered Stacy's body, telling a story the original pathologists had missed. These wounds were not the result of a slip and fall in the shower, nor could they be explained by cardiopulmonary resuscitation efforts or attempts to pull her from a bathtub. They were consistent with a violent, sustained assault. As Dr. Smock later testified, his opinion was that Stacy died of asphyxiation, strangulation, or a combination of both. He believed Stacy had been attacked by someone who straddled her, using their knees to pin down her upper arms while choking and suffocating her. The supporting evidence was overwhelming. Stacy had defensive wounds on the backs of her hands, showing she had fought for her life. Bruising on her upper arms matched the pressure of someone's knees pinning her down. Tiny blood vessel ruptures in her eyes, petechial hemorrhages, were classic signs of strangulation. Perhaps most damning, fabric imprints on her skin indicated that she had been clothed when the attack began, directly contradicting Bob's claim that she died while showering. Dr. Smock's review of the crime scene photographs also revealed signs that the scene had been staged. Stacy was found wearing a dress watch on her left wrist, something highly unusual for a person supposedly about to shower. There was no water on the bathroom floor. Despite Bob's claims she had collapsed in a running shower, some bottles in the shower had been knocked over, hinting at a struggle, while others remained perfectly upright. An unlikely scenario, and most revealing of all, there was no bruising beneath the imprint of a fallen metal shelf on Stacy's body. This suggested she had already been dead when the shelf came into contact with her, meaning her body had been placed in the shower after death. Taken together, Dr. Smock's analysis told a chilling story. Bob had attacked Stacy in their bedroom, strangling and suffocating her during a brutal assault. He then undressed her body and staged the scene in the bathroom to make it appear accidental. According to Dr. Smock, unconsciousness could have set in within just 5 to 10 seconds of pressure on her neck, and she would have stopped breathing entirely within 1 to 2.5 minutes. The injuries he identified were described as constellations of injuries, a pattern that was inconsistent with being pulled from a bathtub or with resuscitation attempts. Instead, they reflected what he called a vicious beatdown. Smock told the court that, based on all the evidence he had reviewed, Stacy's death was definitely a homicide. With Smock's expert analysis in hand, the Denver District Attorney's Office finally had what it needed to move forward. His report transformed what had once been ruled an undetermined death into a prosecutable homicide. On February 16, 2018, nearly 3 years after Stacy's death, Bob, whose real name is Robert Feldman, was arrested and charged with first-degree murder. His arrest should have marked the beginning of the end. Instead, it opened another long and frustrating chapter filled with delays and legal maneuvering. Initially held without bail, Bob was later allowed to post a $1 million bond and placed on house arrest after a preliminary hearing. The defense argued that the state's case was built on circumstantial evidence, and before the trial could even begin, it became mired in delays. Due to global health concerns, trials have been forced to be postponed multiple times, leaving key witnesses unable to travel. Meanwhile, Bob remained at home but was caught repeatedly leaving for unauthorized bike rides across Denver, even posting his routes online in blatant defiance of house arrest rules. Another legal battle soon followed over the money Bob had collected from Stacy's life insurance policy. In 2019, the Colorado Supreme Court ruled that he could use $550,000 of the $750,000 payout to pay for his defense attorneys. For Stacy's family, it was another painful blow. At last, in April 2022, nearly 7 years after Stacy's death, Robert Feldman went to trial. Judge Edward Bronfman presided over the 9-day proceedings, which drew widespread attention. The prosecution's star witness was Dr. Bill Smock, who demonstrated with a mannequin how Bob had attacked Stacy, straddling her, pinning down her arms with his knees, and strangling her. Prosecutor Maggie Conboy told the jury that Stacy Feldman could not recount what happened that day, but her body could. It showed that she had suffered a prolonged, persistent, and horrific beating. Susan McBride, the woman whose call to Stacy had exposed Bob's affair, flew in from Italy to testify about that fateful conversation on the morning of Stacy's death. Even more poignant was the testimony of the Feldmans' teenage daughter, now 16. She told the jury that the morning seemed completely normal. She remembered Stacy coming downstairs and having breakfast with the family. There was talking. Nothing seemed unusual. The defense sought to discredit Dr. Smock, painting him as a hired gun and even a narcissist. He argued that 3 other pathologists had concluded that Stacy's cause of death was undetermined, that rumor and gossip should not be accepted over facts. This was a tragedy, not a murder. Throughout the trial, Robert Feldman sat quietly, showing little emotion. At times, he even laughed with his attorneys as witnesses described his wife's violent and painful death. After just 9 days of testimony, the case went to the jury. Their decision came swiftly, less than 3 hours of deliberation. The verdict was clear. Robert Feldman was guilty of first-degree murder. The family's victim impact statements were powerful. Stacy's mother, Dorothy Marman, said, "If Bob really loved Stacy, he wouldn't have killed their mother. This is all because you couldn't keep your pants zipped and agree to the divorce Stacy wanted. You are evil." Her sister, Susan, added, "She have been fighting for this for 7 years because her sister deserves to rest in peace. He has taken 7 years from her life, and he's not taking one more second." When given the chance to speak, Robert Feldman declined. He offered no apology, no explanation, and no remorse. Only the beginning of a new round of appeals, challenging various aspects of the trial. In November 2024, the Colorado Court of Appeals delivered its final word. Robert Feldman's conviction would stand. In a decisive 51-page ruling, the judges rejected every argument, including his claim that expert testimony had overstepped the coroner's authority. The court made it clear justice had been done. In addition to the life sentence without parole, Robert was ordered to pay over $111,000 for his children's therapy, a small attempt to repair the damage his actions had inflicted. Out of tragedy came strength. Stacy's family and friends founded Stacy's Fund, dedicated to supporting survivors of domestic violence. Her sister, Susan Altman, transformed grief into purpose, becoming a passionate advocate through the Alliance for Hope International. But behind this conviction lay a powerful truth. Robert Feldman was brought down by what prosecutors called the Sisterhood, a determined group of women who refused to let Stacy's killer slip through the cracks. At its core was Susan Altman, whose persistence reignited the investigation when others had given up. Susan McBride's courage in exposing Robert's infidelity revealed both his motive and timeline, and Dr. Bill Smock's expertise in strangulation helped prosecutors dismantle Robert's carefully staged story. Stacy Feldman is remembered not only as a victim, but as a mother, a sister, a friend, a vibrant soul whose tragic death sparked real change in the way domestic violence cases are pursued. In the end, love proved stronger than evil. A sister's determination triumphed over a husband's deception, and Stacy, the woman whose blue eyes once lit up every room, can finally rest in peace, knowing her story brought justice and hope for others.
Welcome back to our channel. Today, we will explore a new case, the case of April Millsap. What could happen to a young woman simply walking through a quiet suburban neighborhood that is considered one of the safest in America? Normally, there would be nothing to worry about, but when a real predator lurks in the shadows, even the safest places can become the scene of a horrific tragedy. April Millsap, 14 years old by the summer of 2014. She was living with her family in Armada, a small town in Michigan, USA. April was a friendly and sweet girl who attended a local high school. She was an only child, and her parents had divorced when she was 6. After the divorce, her mother began a relationship with another man, who later became April's stepfather. April quickly grew close to her stepfather, and they developed a warm bond. April was a cheerful girl with a sense of humor, always bringing joy to her family. Her positive attitude helped her form a close circle of friends. She was creative, loved drawing, stayed active, and dreamed of becoming a veterinarian. Despite her young age, April seemed mature and independent by the time she turned 14. She often walked her dog alone and enjoyed spending time with her friends while maintaining a close relationship with her family. April also had a boyfriend named Austin Schutt, who was a year older than her. They attended the same school and had been dating for about a year at the time of these events. In 2014, the town of Armada had a population of about 1.7 people. It was considered a safe and family-friendly place where everyone knew each other. However, as life sometimes proves, even the safest places can attract danger. Crimes in Armada were rare, but when they did occur, they caused significant alarm. On July 24, 2014, the summer holidays were in full swing. That day, April didn't have any plans to go out or meet friends. She slept until noon and spent most of the day on her computer, chatting with friends and playing games. Around 6 p.m., she decided to take her dog, Penny, for a walk. April often brought Penny along when she met friends or her boyfriend, Austin. That evening, she chose one of her usual walking routes, which she often used to relax. Her walks typically lasted no more than an hour. Her mother, Jennifer, waited for her at home without concern. But when an hour and a half passed and April still hadn't returned, Jennifer became increasingly anxious when April didn't respond to her calls or text messages. So she reached out to April's boyfriend, assuming they might be together. However, Austin told her he hadn't seen April all day and had only communicated with her online. Jennifer's worry deepened, and she began contacting April's friends and classmates, but no one knew where April could be. About half an hour later, there was a knock at the door, hoping it was April returning from her walk. Jennifer felt a brief sense of relief. Instead, she found Austin and his friends standing on the doorstep. They had come to check on April because they were also concerned. Austin then showed Jennifer a message he had received from April at 6:28 p.m., roughly 40 minutes after she had left the house to walk the dog. Although Austin initially said he hadn't heard from her, he admitted to seeing the message later, either because he hadn't noticed it right away or he had been out of network coverage at the time. The message contained a chilling statement: "They tried to kidnap me." Alarmed by this, Austin had immediately started searching for her, realizing the seriousness of the situation. Jennifer called her husband, who at work, alarmed. He left his job immediately to join the search. He joined Jennifer and Austin, and the three decided to split up to cover more ground along the routes April usually walked. Jennifer also contacted the police, who promptly joined the efforts to find April. Shortly afterward, April was found. A man and a woman jogging along one of the trails came across a dog on a leash. Penny the dog seemed extremely agitated. When the woman attempted to grab the leash, Penny ran off but stopped periodically. As if trying to guide them somewhere, they followed Penny into a dense thicket, where they discovered the body of a girl. The victim was later identified as 14-year-old April Millsap by the time her family arrived. Forensic experts were already working at the site. In Armada, the local police force consisted of only 2 officers, neither of whom was trained for cases of this nature. Serious crimes were almost unheard of in the area, and the small force was sufficient for handling minor issues like petty theft. However, this case was different. None of the local officers had ever dealt with a violent murder, and their investigative resources were minimal. The sheriff immediately reached out to more capable authorities at the county level. Law enforcement from other regions was quickly brought in to assist with the investigation. As they had more resources and experience, April was discovered lying on her back at the bottom of a ravine. Her shoes had been removed and were found a few meters away. Her clothing and underwear had been pulled off, suggesting a clear abuse motive. However, further investigation revealed that she had not been abused. Detectives theorized that the attacker may have attempted but failed, possibly because April fought back fiercely or because something like a passerby or the dog interrupted the assault. Regardless, she was subjected to a brutal beating. Her body was covered in bruises, ranging from defensive wounds to severe injuries on her face, which was so disfigured it appeared almost crushed. The forensic examination identified at least 48 separate injuries, many concentrated on her face and neck. Her body was covered in dried blood. There were signs of compression on her neck, but they didn't match the typical patterns seen in manual strangulation or the use of an object. Instead, the injuries on her face and neck bore unusual marks, which forensic analysis confirmed were caused by the tread of a shoe. This indicated that the attacker had stomped on her repeatedly. The forensic report concluded that April's death was the result of being trampled. Marks resembling the sole of a large sneaker were found on her head and neck. Considering the level of violence and the potential motive, investigators believed the perpetrator was likely a large man. The forensic expert concluded that the attack lasted over 10 minutes, during which the girl endured immense agony before dying. Identifying the victim initially proved difficult due to the severe facial injuries, which rendered her unrecognizable. Similarly, her mother was already unidentifiable from the start. The girl's stepmother, boyfriend, and the boyfriend's friend were brought in for police questioning to narrow down the list of possible suspects. The initial investigation focused on her mother, Jennifer, to determine if there were any events or threats that could be related to the case. However, investigators quickly determined that Jennifer had no conflicts, troubles, or unusual events related to her daughter's death. After ruling this possibility out, they turned their attention to April's boyfriend, Austin. To continue to clarify the details of the case, suspicion arose when Austin admitted that his relationship with the victim had been strained recently. They argued often and were on the brink of breaking up shortly before the murder. They had a heated argument. Adding to investigators' doubts was a chilling message April had sent to Austin just before the crime. She told him that someone had attempted to kidnap her, but he chose to ignore this alarming warning. Austin claimed he couldn't respond because the message arrived too late for him to see it. It seems there was a delay in delivery. Detectives noted that after receiving the message, he reacted very slowly, did not inform the police, and instead decided to search for her on his own. Austin explained that he was still upset with his girlfriend and believed the message was an attempt to manipulate him. He thought she was trying to provoke his attention and concern, to push him toward reconciliation, not realizing the gravity of the situation regarding the quarrel. Austin insisted that April's behavior was incomprehensible. The most recent conflict had seemingly come out of nowhere, and he couldn't clearly explain the reasons behind their disagreements. Instead, he placed the blame on her. This only deepened the detective's suspicions, as it suggested Austin might have had a motive for the attack. In many cases, such incidents are committed by partners. As a result, the officers decided to detain him longer and asked him to tell them how his day went in all the details in order to analyze his movements and establish an alibi. Austin said that around 4 p.m., he met a friend to help carry a TV into a house afterward. They went to the nearest McDonald's for a snack. His account was later confirmed by surveillance camera footage from the cafe, which showed him there at the specified time, around 6:30 p.m. Just a few minutes after the message about the attempted kidnapping was sent, it became clear that Austin could not have been involved in the murder, since Austin was ruled out as the killer. Investigators turned their attention to the victim's mobile phone, hoping it might provide crucial information. They suspected April might have received a message from the stalker pursuing her, but her mobile phone could not be found at the crime scene. Detectives theorized that the killer had taken it, turned it off to prevent tracking, and discarded it elsewhere to find the phone and other evidence. A thorough search was conducted along the route April was believed to have taken, but no clues were initially found. Law enforcement, specialized dogs, and the FBI joined the search effort after nearly a full day of searching with no results. A breakthrough occurred the next day. The girl's mobile phone was discovered about a kilometer from the crime scene and was immediately sent to a forensic lab for analysis around the same time. News of the brutal attack spread widely through local newspapers and TV channels. Authorities appealed for witnesses who might have noticed anything unusual on the trail near the time of the crime. However, in the early stages, this only heightened public fear and anxiety. What shocked people most was the sheer brutality of the attack and the fact that it occurred in broad daylight, leaving everyone feeling unsafe. Then, a girl came forward to the police with potentially valuable information. She explained that around 6 p.m. on the day April was killed, she was at home looking out her window when she noticed a white van she had never seen before passing by. A man was driving. With another young man in the passenger seat, the van was moving very slowly, as if the occupants were searching for something or someone. This struck her as odd. When they noticed her watching from the window, they stopped and stared at her, even pointing toward her house. The encounter made her feel uneasy. Afterward, they drove away. Upon hearing about April's murder, the girl became worried that these two men might have been involved. She feared they could have spotted April as a target and attacked her. Detectives found this information reliable and important to the investigation. They considered it plausible that a white van had been driving around the area looking for a victim, and April was unfortunate enough to catch the men's attention. The police appealed to the public once again, sharing a description of the white van and a composite sketch of the two men inside, hoping to gather more reliable leads. The following day, a man and his friend contacted the police. They admitted to driving a van in the area that evening. They explained that they were construction workers and had been driving slowly through the neighborhood because the driver wanted to show his colleague some houses where he had previously worked. One of these houses happened to be where the girl lived. Their account was verified, and local residents confirmed their story. Clearing them of suspicion, the men were eager to assist the investigation in any way they could. The day after the incident, several people contacted the police to report a suspicious motorcycle and its driver. Witnesses reported seeing a schoolgirl walking her dog along a path around 6:30 p.m. They noted that she wasn't alone at the time. She was accompanied by an older man who was pushing his motorcycle by hand. The two appeared to be walking and talking casually at the time. The witnesses assumed the man was her father, as his behavior seemed calm and April showed no signs of fear. However, upon reflecting on the situation later, doubts about the man began to emerge. None of April's friends or family recognized him based on the description provided, suggesting he was a complete stranger to her, according to witnesses. This encounter occurred around the same time April had texted her boyfriend about an attempted kidnapping, raising further suspicions about the man, since there were very few motorcyclists in town. The man and his unusual motorcycle quickly caught the attention of locals. The motorcycle was described as having a rare blue and white color scheme, making it easy to identify. Thanks to this detailed description, police located a motorcycle matching it just 3 days after April's murder, on April 27, 2014. It was found parked in the driveway of a local house. When officers arrived, the motorcycle was still there. The officers approached a man working in the garden, who told them the motorcycle did not belong to him. Instead, it belonged to his 32-year-old friend, James Donald Van Callis, who lived in the neighboring town. About 30 kilometers from Armada, this information was verified. On April 28, officers met with James, the owner of the motorcycle, to question him about his whereabouts on the day April was killed. From the start, James was cooperative and willing to answer all questions. He claimed he had been at a friend's house in Armada during that time, and his friend confirmed the alibi. However, authorities found the alibi unreliable, as the witness was a friend who might have been covering for him. Additionally, there were minor discrepancies in the timeline. When asked about the shoes he wore that day, James provided a pair of white sneakers. However, the tread on the shoes did not match the marks found on the victim's body. Detectives decided to take a closer look at James to eliminate him as a potential suspect. While he had a criminal record, it was not for violent offenses. His convictions included breaking, as well as failing to pay child support, and the robberies occurring in 2005 and 2006. However, upon reviewing James's background, the police uncovered something far more alarming. His father, James Bernard Van Callis, was a registered abuse offender. The elder James Bernard had been convicted of abusing a 13-year-old minor at the time. Both men lived in the same family home. Authorities considered the possibility that James Bernard and James Donald might be involved in criminal activities. However, the investigation primarily focused on the son, as witnesses had identified a middle-aged man matching the witness's description. Searches of their home revealed that James Bernard and James Donald were growing the territory of the prohibited plant. The quantity was so large that they were arrested and charged with distributing the prohibited banned substance. This allowed law enforcement to detain them, ensuring public safety and preventing the suspects from fleeing the state. While the investigation continued, the police thoroughly inspected all the shoes found in the men's house, but none matched the tread marks found on the victim's body. Additionally, numerous DNA tests were conducted on the clothing, but no traces linked to April were discovered. However, forensic experts who examined the motorcycle were confident that James Donald had used strong cleaning agents shortly before it was seized by the police for analysis. They suspected this was an attempt to remove evidence. James Donald was quite successful. As the police no traces were found, the detectives quickly confirmed their theory. When James Donald's girlfriend contacted the police, she reported that on the day of the murder, in April, she came home to find he meticulously cleaning his shoes, motorcycle, and helmet with strong disinfectants. This unusual behavior made her suspicious. The injuries on the victim's head were consistent with marks that could have been caused by a helmet, leading investigators to believe James Donald might have used it during the assault. She also revealed that he had traveled by car that day to a nearby town where the victim lived, supposedly to visit his friend. James Donald's girlfriend described a pair of black and white sneakers that James Donald frequently wore and loved. However, these shoes did not match the ones he handed over to detectives when they questioned him. After that night, she never saw those sneakers again, leading her to believe James Donald had disposed of them. Fearing he couldn't fully clean away the evidence, she further detailed her troubling relationship with James Donald, describing him as extremely abusive and controlling. Recently, she had felt more like his hostage or property than his girlfriend. He tightly controlled every aspect of her life, even forbidding her from leaving the house unless he accompanied her. She suspected him from the start, but feared he would kill her if she contacted the police. Now that James Bernard and James Donald had been arrested, she could finally speak freely. According to James Donald's own admission to his girlfriend, he claimed he was cleaning his belongings because they had been stained with machine oil while fixing his motorbike. However, she remained unconvinced. The police needed to confirm that the sneakers she described matched the ones James Donald commonly wore. They found photos on his social media page showing him wearing sneakers identical to her description, although James Donald had disposed of the pair he wore during the murder. The police located and purchased the same model when they compared the tread pattern to the marks on the victim's body. Forensic experts found an exact match. The investigation revealed that April had been trampled to death with shoes James Donald had purchased about a year before the attack. Further evidence was found on his computer, where investigators uncovered his disturbing interest in much younger girls. Additionally, crucial information came from April's phone using FBI lab analysis. It was discovered that she had a fitness app installed, which monitored her movements, steps, and heart rate, among other data. Shortly after sending a worrying message to her boyfriend, Austin, The data showed she suddenly began running. As if trying to escape from someone, James Donald reportedly approached the girl on his motorcycle and offered her something. Shortly afterward, she sent her boyfriend a message about an attempted kidnapping. Then she ran really fast to escape her pursuer. Minutes later, her fitness app recorded a sudden, chaotic, and extremely fast increase in her movements, lasting 10 to 15 minutes. This appears to have been the moment she fought for her life. Later, the criminal returned to his vehicle with the April's phone. The app recorded a steady speed of about 20 kilometers per hour, which continued until the phone was discarded about a kilometer from the attack site. Surveillance cameras along the biker's route captured footage of the motorcycle and identified the suspect as 32-year-old James Donald. Additionally, geolocation data from his mobile phone confirmed that, at the time of the attack, he was not with a friend, as he claimed, but near the crime scene. By this point, everyone was certain of his involvement in the murder. There was enough evidence to charge him with April's murder and proceed to court. However, a significant challenge remained. The lack of direct evidence. The police were unable to find any DNA linking James Donald to the victim. Of course, against this background, lawyers could effectively refer to indirectly provided evidence. Forensic experts were unable to find traces of the victim's blood on his belongings, equipment, or helmet. James Donald had meticulously cleaned everything and disposed of all incriminating items. It was clear that the man was highly experienced. In this case, the prosecutor's office decided to proceed with the charges despite relying on indirect evidence. These evidences was enough to convince the jury of James Donald's guilt in October 2014. 3 months after the crime, James was formally charged, and the trial was scheduled for early 2016. It was believed that he attacked a teenage girl, April. After she rejected his advances, James Donald had spent considerable time online researching ways to attract much younger girls, particularly minors, but none of the advice seemed to work. Tragically, when April refused him, he reacted violently and attacked her. The defense argued that the prosecution lacked definitive proof of James's guilt and claimed the case was built entirely on circumstantial evidence, although James maintained his innocence. His arguments were unconvincing. As a last resort, his lawyer emphasized that James Donald had no prior record of serious crimes. However, this was not enough to sway the jury. After several hours of deliberation, the jury unanimously found him guilty of attempted kidnapping, abuse, and first-degree murder. James Donald Van Callis was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. During the sentencing, April's mother spoke extensively. She expressed her satisfaction with the court's decision, relieved that the perpetrator would never be released. She was horrified that her child's life had been taken by an adult man simply because his advances were rejected. His actions and intentions were criminal from the start, but the level of cruelty he displayed was unimaginable. Despite this, James refused to admit his guilt or show any remorse. He continued to claim his innocence. Even after his conviction, he attempted to overturn the court's decision by filing an appeal with his lawyer, but it was unsuccessful. Now, he remains in prison for committing a heinous crime against an innocent young girl, April Millsap, in April's memory. A memorial garden was created near the spot where her life was tragically taken. A small statue of her dog, Penny, stands in the garden to honor the pet who led strangers to the scene of the crime. Back to our channel. Today, we will explore a new case. The case of Ashley Fallis. Ashley Fallis married her high school sweetheart right after finishing school, but their marriage lasted only a few years. During that time, she had 2 daughters. When the relationship ended, Ashley, just over 20 years old, she returned to her hometown with her children to live near her mother, Jenna, and stepfather, Joel. She found work as a respiratory therapist, helping patients with breathing and heart issues, became the sole provider for her family. life was difficult, as her ex-husband was not involved in raising their daughters. Despite these hardships, Ashley was described by her mother and stepfather as cheerful, kind, and funny. She and her mother were particularly close, sharing a bond like best friends. In April 2007, Ashley met Tom Fallis, who seemed responsible and ready for family life. Unlike her ex-husband, their relationship progressed quickly, and a few months later, Ashley became pregnant with her third child. 9 months later, they welcomed a son, Blake. 2 weeks after Blake's birth, Ashley and Tom got married. Tom also adopted Ashley's older daughters, however. Ashley's mother and stepfather felt she had rushed into having another child, like marrying Tom and entrusting him with her daughters despite knowing him for only a short time. The family settled in Evans, a small town about an hour north of Denver, Colorado. Ashley continued her work as a respiratory therapist, while Tom took a job as a correctional officer with the Weld County Sheriff's Office. Jenna admitted she found Tom strange from the start. She said, "I didn't like his mindset. He always thought he was right about everything." Tom came across as aggressive, hot-tempered, and controlling toward Ashley. Jenna often tried to convince Ashley to leave her relationship with Tom. Things took a dramatic turn when their youngest son, Blake, was diagnosed with hydrocephalus, a condition causing fluid to build up in the brain. Ashley became focused on researching treatment options for Blake, who had to undergo several major surgeries and required constant care. The stress severely affected Ashley, leaving her depressed, anxious, and irritable. Caring for Blake's health also put a heavy strain on Ashley and Tom's relationship, leading to frequent arguments. By the summer of 2011, Ashley started contemplating divorce. However, Tom encouraged her to seek help from a psychotherapist. After starting medication, Ashley's mental health improved, and their relationship appeared to stabilize. By December 2011, the Fallis family decided to host a New Year's Eve party at their home, inviting family and friends. The preparations for the holiday provided a much distraction from their challenges. Just a few days before the celebration, Ashley discovered she was pregnant again. Filled with joy, she chose to stop taking her medication to protect the baby. For a brief moment, it seemed things were improving for the Fallis family, and thoughts of divorce faded away. Unfortunately, their happiness was short-lived. On the afternoon of December 31, 2011, Ashley started bleeding and feared she was having a miscarriage. Despite her worry, she continued getting ready for the party. That evening, guests started arriving at the Fallis' home, including Tom's parents, Ashley's mother and stepfather, her uncle, and several family friends. The atmosphere was lively as everyone enjoyed chatting and celebrating together. However, tension between Tom and Ashley became evident. They exchanged harsh remarks and occasionally argued during the evening. Ashley confided in a friend, saying she always knew that Tom hates her. Despite the conflict, Ashley and Tom still celebrated the new year with their guests as the party wound down and people began leaving. Ashley's uncle offered her illegal substances. Tom overheard this and became enraged. He scolded Ashley and accused her of unacceptable behavior. In the heat of the argument, Tom revealed to everyone that Ashley's fourth pregnancy had ended earlier that day. He shouted that Ashley always followed her mother's advice rather than thinking for herself. After the quarrel, Ashley went to put her children to bed while her parents prepared to leave at 12:40 a.m. Ashley stepped outside to say goodbye to her mother and stepfather, noticing that Ashley seemed upset. Her mother, Jenna, asked what was wrong. Ashley responded, "It's okay, Mom. It's just Tom. He's like that." She hugged her parents goodbye while Tom stood on the porch, waving as they drove away. Afterward, Ashley and Tom went back inside the house, where the atmosphere was tense, following a brief argument about illegal substances. The two went their separate ways. Tom went into the wardrobe to change when he suddenly heard the sound of a weapon being loaded in the bedroom. Knowing Ashley kept a weapon under her mattress, Tom shouted, asking what was going on, and hurried toward the bedroom. Before he could reach her, he heard the explosion Tom rushed into the room and found Ashley lying on the floor, smoke lingering in the air. She had been injured in the back of the head. In a panic, Tom grabbed her, pressed his hand against the wound to stop the bleeding, and called 911 at 12:50 a.m. as Ashley lay unconscious but still alive. Tom gently closed her eyes and spoke to her, saying, "I'm here. You won't go. You won't leave me." In the early hours of New Year's Day, 2012, the Evans Police Department responded to an emergency call from the Fallis family home. The neighborhood was known to be safe, with low crime rates. Upon arrival, paramedics rushed Ashley to the hospital due wound to her head. Unfortunately, her injuries were critical, and Ashley passed away a few hours later. The police detained Tom at the scene. He was covered in blood and claimed that his wife had self-harm. He also mentioned that Ashley and her mother had attended a party earlier that evening, and Ashley had been very upset, however. Suspicions quickly arose when a neighbor reported hearing screams from the house. The neighbor stated she heard Ashley screaming, begging Tom to get off her and let her go. During his interrogation, Tom denied the accusations. He stated that he did not witness his wife pulling the trigger and denied assaulting her. At any time during the interrogation, investigators asked Tom to undress so they could examine his body. They found fresh scratches on his chest. Tom explained the scratches by claiming he had injured himself while shaving his chest for the first time, which caused itching. Throughout the questioning, Tom appeared visibly nervous and anxious, but consistently denied having any physical contact with Ashley. In the Fallis bedroom, significant evidence suggested that a conflict had occurred. Photographs had been torn off the wall, hinting at a fight, and divorce papers were found displayed on the wall. Ashley also had bruises on her legs, according to Ashley's mother. Tom had been very angry with them when they said goodbye at the party. At the end of the party, he even shouted, "I want you all to die." Despite this evidence, Tom was released without charges. After the interrogation, Ashley's parents were heartbroken and couldn't understand why he was released so easily. Jenna was convinced that her daughter would never willingly leave her children. Ashley loved life and had plans for the future. On January 5, 2012, the medical examiner concluded that Ashley had died from a weapon wound to the back of the head and ruled it self-harm. 2 months later, the case was officially closed. Ashley's grieving parents struggled to accept this conclusion. Eventually, Tom and his children moved to Indiana, where he pursued graduate school. Despite their suspicions, Ashley's parents tried to maintain a good relationship with Tom to stay connected with their grandchildren. However, they never stopped believing that their daughter's death was caused by Tom. 2 years passed until, in early 2014, a local television reporter, Justin Joseph, began his own investigation into the Ashley Fallis case. Joseph spent months interviewing neighbors and investigating the case. After 4 months, the case took a significant turn. A young neighbor of Tom, his name is Nick Glover, revealed an important detail to Joseph. Nick and his mother, Kathy Glover, claimed he heard Tom yelling at his parents outside the house, saying, "God, I can't believe I did this." When his parents asked, "What are you saying?" Tom reportedly yelled, "I attacked her." Nick had informed the police immediately after the tragedy, and his statement was written down. However, no mention of Nick Glover's and Kathy account was found in the official police report. Joseph's report also uncovered another person who confirmed that Tom had confessed. A local police was present at the scene of the tragedy stated that Tom admitted to attack Ashley. Another neighbor also told the reporter that, on the night of the incident, she had called to the police, saying Tom attacked his wife. However, the police report misrepresented this information, stating instead that a woman had called to report that Ashley had self-harm. She also told the police that she had heard Ashley screaming from the Fallis family home, saying, "Leave me alone." Despite this, at that time, the neighbor was not questioned further, which was considered a serious omission since she was a key witness that night. Ashley's parents believed the police had rushed to close the case and blamed Ashley for her own death. despite the circumstantial evidence, thanks to Joseph's investigative work. Chief Rick Brandt began to reevaluate the case and the actions of his officers, who had quickly hushed it up. This time, the Fort Collins Police Department took over the investigation. They considered the testimonies of the neighbors who heard Ashley screaming. Tom continued to deny his involvement in Ashley's death, maintaining that she had pulled the trigger herself on New Year's Eve. Curiously, more than 2 years after Ashley's death, Tom handed over to the police what he claimed was a suicide note written by Ashley. The note read, "Dear Tom, I am sorry for your pain. I am a loser in everything. I don't even love my daughters and son. I love you, but I just can't stand this life anymore." In November 2014, Tom Fallis was charged with the death of Ashley Fallis. He was detained and arrested in Indiana after 3 years of freedom, thinking he had escaped justice. In March 2016, a trial was held against Tom. During the trial, Tom's lawyer argued that he could not have killed his beloved wife, the mother of his 3 children. The lawyer claimed that Ashley had been struggling with mental health issues. He presented documents showing that Ashley had been diagnosed with a mental illness in the summer of 2011. The defense argued that she was impulsive, prone to self-destruction, and had been very drunk on the night of her death. They also claimed that she had suffered a miscarriage on New Year's Eve, further contributing to her distress. Ashley's uncle, however, stated that their family did not believe Ashley had taken her self-harm. They were convinced that Tom was responsible for her death. Ashley's therapist also insisted that his patient had no self-destructive tendencies. He confirmed that she was taking certain medications. However, the doctor did not know that. In addition to them, she was prescribed prescription medicine from other specialists. Ashley apparently hid another important thing from the doctor: information, including the alleged suicide notes she wrote. It turned out that Ashley had written 2 similar notes, one of which was dated July 24, 2011. Ashley's mother, Jenna, insisted that her daughter was fine. But Tom behaved inappropriately that night. He was overly angry and aggressive toward her and toward Ashley. Jenna said that at the end of the party, she watched as Tom walked up the stairs, stood right in front of Ashley, and told Ashley, "I hate you all, and I wish you all died." Then he went into the bedroom and slammed the door loudly. Rick also testified at the trial, confirming that he heard Tom confess to his parents that he attacked his wife. However, his parents denied this information and fully supported their son. A forensic expert who spent 400 hours studying the case explained to the jury where Ashley's head should have been when the explosion rang out. The expert claimed Ashley pulled the trigger herself. The prosecution called a second world-renowned forensic expert, who told the jury that he had come to the opposite conclusion from the previous medical examiner. In his opinion, Tom was next to Ashley at the time of the explosion, and most likely, there was a struggle between the spouses for the weapon, in which Tom won. The jury took only 3.5 hours to reach their verdict. Tom was found not guilty of second-degree murder and of all less serious crimes. Tom was free again. He refused to give any comments to journalists and the media. The jury explained that they believed that Ashley was mentally ill, which is why she self-harmed. Ashley's parents still don't believe that their daughter could abandon 3 children and voluntarily end her life. They are very upset that Tom was released. Ashley's 2 daughters and son remained under the care of Tom and live in Indiana, and Ashley's parents, Jenna and Joel, received the legal right to see their grandchildren. Hello again, crime enthusiasts. Are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Michael Weiss. Jake Nolan was born in New York, USA, as the youngest child in his family, with an older brother and an older sister. The family lived on Long Island and was relatively wealthy. Jake was known for being kind and respectful to everyone. However, at the age of 5, he was diagnosed with attention deficit disorder. This condition affected him throughout his life, becoming more evident at the age of 15 when he began to experience mood swings. Despite facing many challenges, Jake had some positive moments in high school including being recognized for winning a competition. However, this was also when he was diagnosed with anxiety and depression at the age of 17. Jake was hospitalized after a disturbing incident involving his parents after an argument. He threatened to commit end life with a kitchen knife during this time. He was diagnosed with bipolar disorder, a serious condition. His parents tried to help him manage his health problems and regularly consulted specialists, but their efforts were not very successful. Jake was prescribed about 30 different medications. This alone led to serious side effects, often leaving him feeling worse than before. Many of the medications interacted negatively with each other, resulting in poor treatment outcomes during this time. Jake also began drinking and using drugs. When Jake started college, his parents hoped he would improve. At first, everything seemed fine, but then they received a worried call from the school. The dean wanted to know why Jake had been absent for the past 2 weeks. That's when his parents discovered that he had been in bed most of the time. His depression worsened, and he began using illegal drugs regularly. This alarmed his family, who wanted to help him. But even at 19, Jake showed no interest in studying or working. Instead, he spent all his time having fun and avoiding responsibility. One day, Jake's mother spoke to her niece, Pamela Buckbinder, a successful psychiatrist in New York by her 40s. Pamela had won numerous awards and occasionally published articles in popular magazines. Concerned about Jake, Pamela offered to take him into her home for a while and set up a makeshift rehab facility there. She promised to organize therapy sessions for Jake and monitor his medication instead of charging him for her help. Pamela asked Jake to assist her in caring for her 4-year-old son during the summer due to their family ties. They agreed to her plan. Pamela and Jake are cousins, and she saw this as an opportunity to strengthen their family bond while helping to care for her son. When Jake's mother shared this with him, he viewed it as a break from his family and agreed to stay with Pamela for a few months, during which he would help care for her son. Pamela's husband is another prominent psychiatrist, Michael Weiss. Pamela and Michael had a rocky relationship. They often argued and got into physical fights. In one incident, Pamela was arrested for throwing a glass at Michael, causing a head injury that required stitches. Pamela argued that they were both equally at fault, as Michael was also arrested after another altercation and was accused of threatening her. Pamela and Michael ended their relationship in 2009, after which Pamela moved to Greenwich Village in Manhattan in 2011. They began a custody battle during this time. Pamela often spoke ill of Michael to their son, portraying him as a bad father. She also spread false and damaging stories about him to others, apparently trying to turn the child and others against him. This behavior was primarily intended to gain an advantage in the custody dispute and secure a substantial child support payment. By 2012, the couple finally reached an agreement that allowed Michael to spend weekends with their children. However, an unusual condition imposed by Pamela was that Michael purchase a life insurance policy on himself, naming their son Calder as the beneficiary, with Pamela as the trustee. Eventually, Michael, exhausted from the legal battle, reluctantly agreed to this questionable request. The custody battle reached its final stages after Jake moved into Pamela's home. Jake began sharing his thoughts and struggles with Pamela, who gave him advice, monitored his medications, and made his life much easier. Jake became the godfather to Pamela's son Calder, and often said that the experience gave his life meaning. On November 12, 2012, Michael spent the day with his son, Calder, for the first time. He felt excited because he had reached an agreement with Pamela about custody, allowing him to interact with Calder without stress. Michael's schedule that morning was to take Calder to kindergarten and then go to work. In the afternoon, Calder would return home to his mother, while Michael was attending a therapy session with a patient. Jake appeared at the door with a worried look on his face and carrying a large bag. Michael realized that Jake knew he had moved in with Pamela and was dealing with some mental health issues. However, Michael was unsure about the current situation because he was with a patient. He asked Jake to wait outside until he finished. When the therapy session ended, Michael found Jake still waiting in the hallway. Dr. Michael asked him about the large bag. Jake claimed that it contained important documents for Calder's kindergarten that he had helped Pamela prepare. However, Michael was skeptical about this explanation. Michael asked Jake to leave the bag outside because he was worried that Jake might plant a listening device there. However, Jake insisted he couldn't leave the bag behind as it could be stolen. Eventually, Michael relented and allowed Jake to bring the bag inside with him upon entering the office. Jake asked to use the restroom first. Later, he attacked Michael with a sledgehammer. Fortunately, Michael avoided a fatal blow to the head, but Jake struck him in the shoulder. Jake then lost his balance because the sledgehammer was too heavy, dropped it, and pulled out a knife to attack Michael. Michael fought back, pushed Jake away, tried to run into the hallway, and called for help. People gathered in the hallway, and shortly after, Michael passed out from blood loss. Witnesses called the police and paramedics. Jake, however, didn't attempt to flee. Instead, he sat in the hallway and took pictures. When the paramedics arrived, they found Michael unconscious and Jake sitting beside him. Jake told the paramedics that Michael had attacked him first. Meanwhile, both Michael and Jake were taken to the hospital, where they were placed under police supervision. Forensic experts retrieved the sledgehammer and knife from Michael's office. Upon examination, they found a DNA sample on the handle of the sledgehammer that matched Jake's. The knife was also analyzed and determined to have come from Pamela's kitchen inside a large bag belonging to Jake. The police found a pack of cigarettes, zip ties, and a hand-drawn map of the building where Michael worked, showing multiple entrances and exits. The police traced the bag to a purchase near Pamela's home. They reviewed surveillance footage from a nearby hardware store and observed that Jake had bought the sledgehammer used in the attack, along with zip ties and a bag. The night before, Pamela was seen next to him, paying cash for the items, possibly aware of the planned crime. Although Michael suffered multiple injuries, none were life-threatening. Jake was taken to the hospital but was released on $200 bail while awaiting a hearing on the attempted murder charge. He is allowed to stay with his parents in Miami. Jake spoke to the police and claimed that the attack was self-defense, stating that Michael had taken Jake's sledgehammer and tried to injure himself. When Jake realized that his lie was not convincing, he decided to tell the police the truth about what had happened. He accused Pamela of being the real mastermind, claiming that she had manipulated him and turned him against Michael. Pamela then provided the police with Jake's medical history, which indicated that he had suffered from a number of serious mental health issues. The police investigated Jake's testimony, and evidence supporting his claim quickly emerged. Pamela had an ulterior motive to harm her ex-husband. In November 2013, Michael Weiss filed a lawsuit against Pamela, alleging that his ex-wife pressured him into taking out a $1 million life insurance policy. He pointed out that the attack occurred just 4 days after the contract was issued, which raised suspicions. Michael believed that this was a planned plot to benefit Pamela financially. Additionally, Jake's attorney secured a restraining order against Pamela, arguing that it was necessary to protect Jake's mental health from her influence. Despite the overwhelming evidence against Pamela, she was not arrested or questioned, and her medical license remained intact. Meanwhile, the investigation continued, and an expert was brought in to analyze the building blueprints found in Jake's bag. It was revealed that Pamela had drawn the blueprints, but she claimed that the maps were for Jake to find Michael and pick up Calder if necessary. Pamela was in regular contact with Jake before and after the attempted assassination. Their text messages showed that she was aware of his whereabouts and what was going on. After Jake sent a selfie to Michael following the attempted assassination, they had a long conversation that revealed the plan had failed. Jake expressed guilt for not being able to kill Michael during this time. Jake fully admitted his actions and showed a willingness to accept the consequences, no matter how severe they might be. He told detectives that Pamela had convinced him to kill Michael to free her from an abusive relationship that was harming both her and her young son at the time. Jake was so close to the boy that he wanted to help his relatives get rid of Michael. He did not know that Michael's life was insured for a significant amount of money and that Pamela could benefit from the insurance payout. Jake did not care about the money because his family supported him. However, Pamela manipulated him to the point that he was willing to do anything for her. Unfortunately, the case did not progress. Even after 2 years, the situation remained unchanged. As of 2015, Pamela was still living comfortably at home with her son, sharing custody with Michael, as there was no evidence to prove her involvement in the attempted murder. Meanwhile, Jake is in Miami, receiving comprehensive care, and his condition begins to improve as he starts to regain his sanity. Jake realizes that he has become a pawn in Pamela's scheme. Devoted to caring for her child and managing household responsibilities, he understands that Pamela never intended to help him. Instead, she aimed to use him for her own dubious purposes. Jake has overcome his harmful habits and envisions a future where he can start a family and raise children. However, he faces the serious possibility of being imprisoned for years due to the betrayal of someone he once trusted. Additionally, questions begin to arise regarding the nature of Jake's relationship with Pamela, which seems to extend beyond simple family support and therapeutic assistance. Their interactions resemble typical affectionate exchanges between newlyweds, and a photo of them together in bed has surfaced. It appears that Pamela is pursuing Jake with the intent of deepening their relationship. Possibly to manipulate him, Pamela recounted a fabricated story of having endured physical violence throughout her marriage. She eventually accused Michael of trying to gain custody of their son. Over time, Jake grew to believe her, insisting that he would do anything for Pamela. She convinced him that in order to survive, he needed to eliminate Michael. It was clear that Pamela was not strong enough to confront a robust adult man, making Jake a suitable candidate for her dangerous scheme. The trial began in March 2016, where the jury was presented with a detailed account of the events that took place on November 12, 2012. Jake recalled Pamela waking him up that morning, insisting that it was time to put their plan into action. She showered him with compliments, calling him her savior. After breakfast, she continued her manipulations. On November 11, they purchased a sledgehammer, zip ties, and a bag in preparation for their plan. The details of the plot were far more sinister than the events that transpired in Michael's office. Initially, Jake was supposed to attack Michael and torture him before he died. Pamela wanted Michael to suffer for as long as possible. Jake then went to Michael's office, entering through the service entrance, where security cameras recorded his arrival. Remarkably, he made no attempt to conceal his identity. With confidence, he walked down the hallway and approached Michael's office. At the time, Michael was examining a patient, forcing Jake to step back and wait outside. Jake was in the hallway. Rethinking his actions, he soon realized that if he backed out now, he wouldn't be able to face Pamela. There was no turning back. So he carried out the attack. While awaiting trial, Jake undergoes evaluations from several psychiatrists, who noted that he was fully aware of his actions. Concluding that his decision to kill Michael was intentional, the jury deliberated and found Jake Nolan guilty of attempted murder. He was sentenced to 9.5 years in prison, while Pamela remained free on bail. This changed on October 19, 2017, when the police attempted to arrest Pamela and urged her to turn herself in, but she ignored their requests. When the search began, she could not be found at any known address and did not answer her cell phone or work phone. An anonymous source eventually informed the police of Pamela's whereabouts, and she was arrested at a friend's home. Pamela was charged with second-degree intentional homicide and first-degree assault on September 7, 2022. Pamela Buchbinder admitted guilty to these charges to avoid a 25-year sentence, however. On October 11 of that year, she attempted to withdraw her guilty plea, claiming that she had been under the influence of illegal drugs and had been assaulted by security guards. Her request to withdraw her guilty plea was denied. Ultimately, Pamela was sentenced to 11 years in prison, and her medical license was officially revoked. Jake felt deep remorse for his actions. His parents firmly believed in his innocence and were convinced that Pamela was responsible for his condition. Jake's parents stated that sending Jake to Pamela's home for treatment was the worst decision they ever made. Pamela, however, continued to maintain her innocence. The child's father, Michael, was granted custody. Welcome back to our channel. Today, we will explore a new case, the case of Lauren Kanarek. Michael Barrassone, an Olympic equestrian champion, was regarded as one of the world's top trainers. He coached other Olympic athletes and represented the USA at the 2008 Beijing Olympics. Barrassone owns two beautiful horse farms, one outside Palm Beach and one in New Jersey's prime horse country. He calls this one Hawthorne Hill, a paradise for horse enthusiasts. The property housed dozens of horses that required constant care. Lauren Kanarek contacted Michael with the dream of becoming an equestrian champion. Her passion for horses began at the age of 3, when she and her parents visited a small horse farm in Wellington, Florida. Seeing a horse for the first time left a lasting impression, and from that moment, she couldn't stop thinking about these animals. As she grew older, her desire to pursue equestrian sports only strengthened. Recognizing her passion, Lauren's father bought her first horse as a graduation gift, allowing her to fully embrace the hobby she loved. In March 2018, at an equestrian competition, Lauren caught the attention of Michael after her performance. Michael approached her and invited her to train at his equestrian club in New Jersey for Lauren, who was actively searching for the best trainer. This was an incredible opportunity. She was thrilled by the chance to train at Michael's prestigious club. However, no one could have predicted the challenges that lay ahead for both Michael and Lauren as they worked together. The one thing they undeniably shared was a deep, mutual love for horses. By that time, Lauren owned 2 horses. Michael spoke passionately about his equestrian club, saying, "This was my life. It was my home. I built it from scratch. It was my love." Michael provided Lauren with accommodations at his farm in New Jersey, where she moved in with her boyfriend, Rob Goodwin. They agreed that Lauren would pay Michael $5 a month for her training and housing. Lauren stayed in a white farmhouse that Michael shared with his assistants, Justin Harden and Mary Haskins Gray, who also worked in the equestrian field. Michael and Mary were not just colleagues. They were in a romantic relationship. Mary, who was divorced, had 2 children from her previous marriage, a daughter and a son. The group lived together peacefully, and Michael had a good relationship with everyone. For Lauren, it seemed as though her childhood dreams had come true, and her life appeared to be going well. She even shared photos on social network of herself with Michael, believing everything was perfect. However, her coach found her to be a challenging and demanding student. Stable workers noted that by the summer of 2019, tensions had risen between Michael and Lauren. The issues began when most of Lauren's sessions were led by his assistants, Justin and Mary. Lauren had hoped to train directly with the Olympic champion, not with his assistants. Each day, the atmosphere on the farm seemed to become increasingly intense, as though something terrible was about to happen. Lauren and Mary's relationship became increasingly strained. Lauren resented Michael for spending more time with Mary and wanted all his attention for herself. Unwilling to let anyone stand in her way, Michael understands the conflict but doesn't want to push Lauren away since she pays him every month. At the same time, he wanted to protect his romantic relationship with Mary. Frustrated, Lauren wasn't willing to accept the situation. Lauren, an active social network user, quickly launched an online campaign. She shared a narrative using a chessboard analogy. Michael was portrayed as the king trapped and defeated, while Mary was depicted as the queen who would need to be sacrificed to protect the castle. The stables. 2 weeks later, Lauren posted a message. Anyone who continuously kicks a sleeping beast will sooner or later wake it up. Tensions in the Hawthorne Hill had reached a breaking point. Lauren expressed her growing concern for her horse's well-being to her father, saying, "They're the reason I wake up in the morning, and the reason I can't sleep at night." She believed her horses were being mistreated, claiming they were either underfed or overfed. Meanwhile, Michael's staff accused Lauren of violating the barn's rules, with one stable worker alleging that they had seen her sneaking into the barn at night. Rumors began to circulate that she was planning to do something with the horses. Lauren defended herself, explaining that one of her horses required special care. She and her boyfriend, Rob, hid a recording device in the barn. As Lauren claimed, she felt unsafe around Michael's staff. At the same time, she posted another angry message on social network, accusing Michael of racism and homophobia. Michael, enraged by the accusations, vehemently denied them, fearing the damage they could do to his career. The Olympic champion, who had worked for years to build his reputation, was terrified that everything he had achieved was being undermined. In her next post, Lauren claimed that the 6'3" man had been bullying her, leaving her fearful for her safety. However, there were no witnesses to support her allegations, which worked in Michael's favor. The stable staff, unaware of the full story, feared that something terrible might happen. Michael revealed that living with Lauren and her boyfriend under the same roof had become intolerable. He asked Lauren to take her belongings, including her horses, and leave with Rob. However, Lauren had no intention of leaving. Eventually, Michael and Mary decided to leave the house themselves. They relocated to Michael's winter property, just 30 minutes from Palm Beach, Florida. Mary's daughter was sent to camp, while her son went to live with his biological father, as staying together with the children no longer felt safe. On July 31, 2019, at 9 p.m., Michael called the police, saying, "There's a war going on, and it needs to be dealt with right now. I've had enough. They threw us out of our home, and I need to deal with this tonight. I need them to leave." The police dismissed the call as a standard landlord-tenant dispute and did not intervene. Michael later described his turmoil, saying, "My paradise had turned into hell. I walked outside and circled the house all night. Without stopping, it was like that every day. I wasn't sleeping, and I wasn't eating." Lauren continued her online harassment, posting another message on social network filled with accusations and threats. On August 3, 2019, at 9:35 a.m., Michael contacted the police again, stating, "They're crazy, they're stalking us, and we're afraid for our lives." However, Lauren's father dismissed Michael's calls to the police as fabrications. It was later revealed that Lauren had filed a complaint with Safe Sport, an organization that investigates misconduct in sports. Accusing Michael and Mary of mistreating her, Lauren alleged that Michael had intimidated and verbally abused her, though she did not accuse him of physical violence. On August 7, 2019, a van arrived at Michael's home, and a woman stepped out. She turned out to be a social worker from the New Jersey Department of Children and Families. She approached Michael and asked, "I need to speak with Ms. Mary. Where can I find her?" Michael called Mary over. The social worker intended to check on Mary's children, but the children were not at home at the time. The barn staff reassured the social worker that the children were well cared for and treated kindly by Michael and Mary. Social worker confirmed that there were no social problems in their family. However, the implication of potential harm toward children deeply upset Michael. Feeling pushed to his limit, he decided to take decisive action. inside his office. Michael opened a safe and took out a black and pink weapon. He left the house, got into his truck, and drove down the gravel road to the farm where Lauren and Rob were staying. What happened next remains uncertain, but at 2:13 p.m. that day, Lauren called 911, struggling to breathe. She said, "I've been attacked in the heart. Michael Barrasone attacked me. Please help." While she was on the call, the sounds of a fight between Rob and Michael could be heard in the background. When the police arrived, they found Rob holding a badly beaten Michael down on the ground. Rob had the weapon in his possession. The officers immediately handcuffed Michael. Lauren was in critical condition. Lying on her back, pale and nearly gray, she was rushed to the hospital for emergency surgery. Doctors were uncertain if she had suffered brain damage. To stabilize her, Lauren was placed in a medically induced coma and connected to tubes supporting her body. Meanwhile, Michael was also hospitalized. When he woke up in a hospital bed, he saw himself handcuffed to the bed rail. He claimed to have no memory of attack Lauren, as if his mind had been completely wiped the following day. Michael Barrasone was charged with attempted murder and faced the possibility of an 80-year prison sentence. Confused and furious, he couldn't understand how it had all happened. Lauren remained in a coma for 4 days, followed by 3 weeks in the intensive care unit, unable to speak due to being on a ventilator. She eventually recovered enough to talk to the police after being moved to a regular hospital room. Lauren explained that Michael had been hiding behind a bush near her back porch, unaware that he had a weapon. She approached him and started talking. Suddenly, Michael pulled out the weapon and attacked her twice. Rob was nearby, witnessed the attack. Rob stated that Michael also attacked at Rob, but missed after Rob hitting him on the head, a blow that was likely the cause of his memory loss. Rob stating, Lauren didn't have time to say anything to Michael before he pulled out the weapon. He wasn't there to talk, he was there to kill them. Meanwhile, Michael's defense argued that Lauren had deliberately driven him to a mental breakdown. Mary testified during the trial, describing the summer of 2019 as a particularly difficult time. She said Michael was anxious, frightened, and frequently panicked. Michael spent over 2 years in prison until spring 2022. His high-profile trial eventually began and lasted nearly 3 weeks. During her testimony, Lauren was asked if she had ever planned to ruin Michael. She admitted, at some point, yes. Michael's defense team employed a rare strategy, arguing that he had temporarily become insane and was mentally unbalanced. The doctors asserted that Lauren gaslit him, manipulated his perception of reality, and drove him beyond his breaking point. However, Nagel, Lauren's attorney, suggesting that Michael's memory lapse was selective, affecting only the crime itself while leaving other memories intact. Final. The court found Michael Barrasone not guilty of committing a crime against Lauren Kanarek. The jury concluded that, at the time of the incident, Michael was not mentally stable. He was not held criminally liable for his actions on that day at the equestrian club. The judge declared Michael the true victim in the story. After the verdict, Michael burst into tears and collapsed into his lawyer's arms. His legal team rejoiced, calling it justice. Michael considers the day of the verdict the best day of his life. Reflecting afterward, Michael said, "I was lost. I'm like a rudderless ship. The world as I knew it is gone. So now I have to build a new world." Lauren's lawyer is determined to seek justice and refuses to give up. He firmly believes the court's decision is unreasonable and considers Michael a criminal who deserves the maximum penalty. Lauren's father also believes the jury was wrong and insists that Michael should be sentenced to life imprisonment. A few weeks after the verdict, Michael was transferred to a psychiatric hospital. After undergoing evaluation at the psychiatric hospital, Judge Stephen Taylor ruled that Michael should be moved to a less restrictive facility. His supporters remain hopeful that he will soon be allowed to return home. In November 2023, Michael was released, but still requires regular psychiatric treatment. Meanwhile, after enduring several rounds of surgeries and treatments, Lauren has returned to horseback riding. Hi everyone, Thanks for returning. Let's unravel another horrible case. The case of Jeffrey Dahmer. Jeffrey Dahmer was born on May 21, 1960, in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, United States. His father, chemist Lionel Herbert Dahmer, and his mother, Joyce Annette Dahmer, faced various challenges. Joyce struggled with depression and possibly other mental health issues, which required her to take large amounts of medication, even during her pregnancy. Despite these difficulties, their first child, Jeffrey, was born healthy and displayed a cheerful and curious personality in his early years. However, when he was about 5 years old, he developed a double inguinal hernia and required surgery. Initially, Jeffrey was described as an active and cheerful child, but after the surgery, his parents observed a change in his demeanor. He seemed more withdrawn and showed signs of depression. One day, Jeffrey witnessed his father taking an animal carcass from under the house and placing it on a tray. The sight caught Jeffrey's attention, and he became curious. Without hesitation, he began playing with it. His father, Lionel, whose job and academic career required him to move several times, eventually earned a doctorate in chemistry. This achievement led Jeffrey's family to settle in Bath, Ohio, where they found a large plot of land surrounded by trees. After moving to Ohio, Jeffrey began to avoid social interaction, preferring solitude. However, he cherished the time he spent with his father, participating in various activities together, such as fishing. Jeffrey enjoyed watching his father prepare fish and was curious about what was inside them. Lionel noticed this passion in his son and suggested that he learn taxidermy. Although Jeffrey did not experience physical abuse at home, he grew up in a tense atmosphere. His parents, Lionel and Joyce, argued frequently. Lionel often criticized Joyce for not taking good care of their son, while Joyce expressed frustration with Lionel's long hours at work and school, feeling that he was neglecting the family. Over time, they realized that Jeffrey was quite withdrawn and had difficulty connecting with others. When Jeffrey was 7, he got his first pet, a dog. This brought him immense joy, and he took great care of the dog, even bringing it along when he explored the area for animal carcasses. At the same time, Joyce became pregnant with their second child. To help Jeffrey feel included, his parents allowed him to choose a name for his younger brother, which he decided would be David. Jeffrey attended primary school in Bath, where his father made efforts to encourage him to socialize with other children. Although these efforts were largely unsuccessful, on weekends, Lionel spent time with Jeffrey, tending to the garden and bees together, and attending local fairs. Their relationship was strong, and Jeffrey even wrote poems for his father during this time. His mother, Joyce, was hospitalized for depression and anxiety, which was a difficult period for the family. When Jeffrey entered secondary school, he continued to enjoy dissecting animals and began to explore his abuse. During this time, he kissed a boy from the neighborhood, which led him to realize that he was attracted to boys. Although he struggled to accept this part of himself, Jeffrey faced increasing anxiety due to his father Lionel's homophobic views. Throughout high school, he endured bullying. To cope with the challenges around him, he turned to alcohol. This dependence on alcohol led him to come to school drunk and even drink during class. As a result, he was often reprimanded and disciplined. His behavior varied greatly. Sometimes he was the center of attention, while at other times he was very shy in school. Jeffrey often engaged in behavior that was considered humorous or eccentric. He acted as the class clown, frequently imitating epileptic seizures and making sheep noises during class. As he grew older, he even began drawing chalk sketches of human bodies on the classroom floor. Around the age of 14 or 15, Jeffrey began to experience disturbing obsessive thoughts related to sex. This struggle intensified over time, leading him to develop various fantasies. However, unlike typical teenage fantasies, Jeffrey's were more disturbing. Jeffrey found his senior year of high school particularly challenging because his parents decided to get a divorce. Lionel moved away and took refuge in a hotel, while Jeffrey's mother also decided to leave home, taking her youngest son, David, with her and leaving Jeffrey alone. Just a few weeks after graduating, he began to explore his fantasies more freely. Jeffrey's fantasies began to take shape in a disturbing way. He often thought about a young man he had met while playing sports on his way home. This man frequently jogged in the evenings, shirtless, and Jeffrey found himself drawn to him. Jeffrey then imagined a scenario where he would hide in the bushes, and when the man passed by, Jeffrey would attack him and take him home. However, on the day, Jeffrey decided to make this fantasy a reality. The young man did not show up for his usual jog. Another fantasy that Jeffrey cherished was picking up a hitchhiker and taking him home. In this scenario, they would share an intimate moment and eventually live together in harmony. This fantasy became a reality in 1978 when Jeffrey was driving down the road and spotted a young hitchhiker who fit his ideal type. Jeffrey stopped and offered the young man a ride in his car. The young man, eager to go to the summer music festival, accepted Jeffrey's invitation to have a beer at his house first. His name was Stephen Hicks, and he had just turned 18. They returned to Jeffrey's house together after drinking a few beers. Stephen asked Jeffrey to fulfill his promise to take him to the festival. Jeffrey hesitated, and an argument ensued. Eventually, Stephen decided to leave, which escalated the situation in a fit of rage. Jeffrey hit Stephen with a dumbbell, causing him to fall to the floor, unconscious. In a panic, Jeffrey strangled Stephen until he stopped breathing. Jeffrey then processed Stephen's body, placing it in 5 black trash bags. He loaded the bags into his car and drove off to find a place to dispose of them. Jeffrey began to drive erratically and out of his lane. The patrolman saw Jeffrey and asked him why he was driving like that. Jeffrey confided in the officer about his struggles with insomnia and his parents' recent divorce. Expressing feelings of hopelessness about his life, he remained polite and calm throughout the conversation. When the officer asked about the car, he explained that it was full of trash and that he was looking for a place to properly dispose of it. Jeffrey made a good impression on the officer, who asked him to return home. Jeffrey complied and returned to his house with the trash bags containing Stephen's body. He eventually hid the bags in the basement. The next day, he continued to process Stephen's body. Attempting to crush the bones, he then scattered them in various locations behind the house. In the days that followed, Jeffrey paid attention to newspapers and news reports, hoping to find any updates on the missing man. However, he found none. He had committed a serious crime, but it was still a secret. This prompted him to repeat his crime. A week after Jeffrey's mother, Joyce, left home, Lionel found his son living alone and increasingly anxious. He encouraged Jeffrey to find a job, but Jeffrey showed little interest instead. He spent his days drinking. To help, Lionel took him to Alcoholics Anonymous meetings and arranged sessions with psychologists. Lionel encouraged Jeffrey to pursue his studies at Ohio University. Although Jeffrey did not outright refuse, he continued to drink and think about Stephen's murder. In the following months, he donated blood in exchange for money to buy alcohol. By the end of the semester, his academic difficulties led to his expulsion from the university. However, Lionel was determined and convinced Jeffrey to enlist. Believing that military discipline could have a positive impact on him, Jeffrey complied and successfully passed the selection process. His passion for medical care took him to San Antonio, Texas, where he trained to become a military medic. Allowing him to gain a deeper understanding of human anatomy, Jeffrey eventually found his passion in his work. After 6 months, he had changed dramatically. Military physical training not only improved his physique, but also made him more sociable. For the first time, Lionel witnessed his son smile, although not while on leave. After completing his training, Jeffrey was deployed to a base in Germany. Unfortunately, his struggles with alcohol were not resolved, and when the authorities learned of the problem, he was discharged from the military upon returning to the United States. Jeffrey chose to distance himself from his father instead of going home. He settled in Miami, where he rented a hotel room and found work at a diner. At first, his life seemed okay, but it quickly became unstable. Jeffrey drank more and soon found himself unable to afford a hotel room, forcing him to sleep on the beach. Realizing that he could not continue like this, he decided to ask his father for financial help. Lionel, understanding that giving his son money might cause him to drink more, Lionel bought Jeffrey a ticket home instead, determined not to give up. Lionel committed to helping his son find a better path forward. Lionel picked Jeffrey up from the airport. Jeffrey greeted him with a bright smile, which initially led Lionel to believe that his son was simply happy to see him. However, it soon became clear that Jeffrey had consumed a significant amount of alcohol before the flight. Faced with this reality, Lionel decided that the best course of action would be to send Jeffrey to live with his grandmother in Milwaukee. During his time with her, Jeffrey matured considerably. He developed a deep respect for his grandmother, who, by many accounts, was the only person he felt truly close to. Jeffrey helped her with various chores around the house and even attended church with her during the first few weeks. Jeffrey began reading the Bible, which helped him alleviate some of his negative thoughts. However, he still struggled with his fantasies. One day, he stole a male mannequin from a clothing store and hid it in his closet. He saw the mannequin as the perfect companion because it never rejected him, made no demands, and inspired him. However, one day, his grandmother discovered the mannequin and was horrified. She insisted that Jeffrey leave the house, but he calmed her down by promising to get rid of it one day. While sitting in the library, a man approached Jeffrey and handed him a note instructing him to meet in the men's room. Although Jeffrey chose not to accept the invitation, the incident sparked something within him, and after 9 years, his repressed desires resurfaced. In 1985, Jeffrey frequented the sauna, looking for men to satisfy his desires. When he found someone who interested him, he would invite them out for a drink. However, he would secretly put sleeping pills in their drinks. When the victim passed out, Jeffrey would lie down next to them. After one of his victims was poisoned and hospitalized, Jeffrey was banned from the club he frequented. Despite this, he continued to seek abuse partners in other bars and clubs. He preferred muscular young men and did not care about their skin color or hair color. In November 1987, Jeffrey met a man named Stephen Tuomi, a dancer and waiter from Michigan. They fell in love and decided to spend some time alone together. They rented a room at the Ambassador Hotel in Milwaukee, where Jeffrey offered Stephen a cocktail that had been spiked with sleeping pills. When Jeffrey woke up the next morning, he found bruises on Stephen Tuomi's forearms and chest, along with blood coming from his mouth. Jeffrey did not remember killing Stephen and could not believe it had happened. However, he was in the same room as the corpse, which prompted him to quickly leave the hotel, cross the street, and buy a suitcase. He returned to the hotel, placed Stephen's body in the suitcase, paid the bill in the lobby, and called a taxi. A hotel employee helped Jeffrey carry the suitcase, which was so heavy that the employee jokingly asked if there was a body inside. Jeffrey replied, "Yes," and they both laughed. Unaware that the employee was helping to dispose of a body, Jeffrey then went to his grandmother's house with the suitcase and secretly took it to the basement. He began to process Stephen Tuomi's body. He placed it in trash bags and then moved the bags containing the body into the trash. Several months later, Stephen Tuomi's relatives filed a missing persons report after he was last seen the night he met Jeffrey while working as a waiter. Although police initially believed that Stephen had simply left, his family did not accept this explanation. They had been unable to contact him, and his belongings were still in his house. However, the investigation stalled, and there was no explanation for Stephen Tuomi's disappearance. After not being held accountable for his actions, Jeffrey increasingly embraced his dark desires and became a serial killer. Over the next 5 years, he committed multiple murders on his free nights and weekends. After 3 months of searching for new victims, Jeffrey met a 14-year-old boy at a bus stop near a club. Jeffrey approached the boy and offered to pay him $50 to sleep with him. And unfortunately, the boy accepted the offer. They took the bus to Jeffrey's grandmother's house, where she was sleeping. While they went down to the basement, there, Jeffrey drugged the boy and then strangled him. He became more perverted, abusing the boy while he was dead as the body began to decompose. Jeffrey treated it like those of his previous victims. He began to dispose of the body of James Dox Tater. He packed the body in plastic bags and threw it in the trash. The victim's name was James Dox Tater, according to the Tampa Bay Times. James had run away from home 2 days earlier to escape his abusive stepfather, although his mother filed a complaint. Police showed little interest in finding him. Jeffrey's fourth victim was Richard Guerrero, a 22-year-old Hispanic man. They met outside a gay bar called Phoenix. Jeffrey lured Richard to his grandmother's house, promising to pay him to spend the night in the basement. Jeffrey drugged Richard with sleeping pills, then strangled him with a leather strap and began abusing him after he was dead. After satisfying his desires, Jeffrey put the body parts in garbage bags, which were picked up by a garbage service the next day. Richard's family urged the police to investigate his disappearance, but the officers believed he had left home voluntarily. However, Richard's sister believed otherwise and convinced her relatives to hire a private investigator. Richard's father, who worked at a golf course, spent all his savings on the investigator. But it turned out that the investigator was a fraud. Meanwhile, Richard's mother prayed daily for his safe return. Jeffrey's grandmother asked him to move out because she was fed up with him. He was no longer the grandson she used to go to church with. His drinking, his habit of bringing young men to her house late at night, and the stench from the basement and garage were too much for her to bear. As a result, Jeffrey had to find a new place to live. He rented a small apartment, where he stayed for a while as he prepared for his next victim. Jeffrey then found his fifth potential victim, a 13-year-old boy who came to his apartment. They met on the street, where Jeffrey offered to pay the boy in exchange for allowing him to take pictures. However, when Jeffrey tried to touch the boy got scared and ran away. The 13-year-old then informed his parents about the incident, and they reported it to the police. As a result, Jeffrey was arrested and charged with harassment. He received a 1-year sentence at the Milwaukee Correctional Center. Although he was allowed to leave during the day to go to work, he was required to return to the facility at night just days before his sentence began. Jeffrey met his sixth victim, a 24-year-old man named Anthony Sears. On March 25, 1989, Jeffrey and Anthony met at a bar, and when the bar closed, they decided to spend the night together. They could not go to Anthony's house because his girlfriend was there. Jeffrey asked a friend to drive them to his grandmother's house when they arrived. He took Anthony to the basement and committed his usual act. However, this time was different. After disposing of the body, he put it in several different garbage bags. Some of Anthony's remains he threw in the trash, while others he kept in his locker at work. During Jeffrey's trial, his lawyer successfully reduced his sentence to just 10 months in a rehabilitation center. Jeffrey's father wrote to the judge, asking that Jeffrey be allowed to attend an alcohol treatment program while incarcerated. However, the judge received the letter too late, and Jeffrey was released without undergoing any rehabilitation. After his release, Jeffrey upgraded the security in his apartment by installing cameras and an alarm system. On June 24, 1990, Jeffrey went on a killing spree while at one of his favorite bars. He noticed a man named Raymond Smith. Jeffrey drugged Raymond and abused him before killing him. Just a month after killing Raymond, Jeffrey targeted another victim, 27-year-old Edward Smith. Edward was lured in with an offer of $100 to have his picture taken. With Jeffrey pretending to be a photographer, Edward was last seen alive talking to Jeffrey at a club. In September 1990, Jeffrey murdered his eighth victim, 22-year-old Ernest Miller. Ernest was attractive and healthy, and he worked as a dancer. He agreed to pose for photos in Jeffrey's apartment for $50, which put him in a dangerous situation. Jeffrey followed his usual pattern, plied Ernest with a mixture of alcohol and strong drugs. And this time, however, Ernest woke up before Jeffrey could strangle him. Resulting in a struggle, Jeffrey attacked Ernest with a knife. After killing him, Jeffrey disposed of the body as he had done with his other victims. But this time, he took a more disturbing step. Not only did he handling of the body, he also put it in the freezer for later use. The foul smell emanating from Jeffrey's apartment caused complaints from neighbors. To explain the smell, Jeffrey claimed that his meat refrigerator had broken down. To solve the problem, he bought a large plastic barrel and filled it with acid to destroy the body parts. Although he was able to remove some of the evidence, the smell remained. It seemed that Jeffrey did not care about the complaints from the neighbors. On September 24, 1990, Jeffrey continued his killing spree, targeting David Thomas, a 22-year-old man whom he had met at the Grand Avenue Mall. Jeffrey convinced David to return to his apartment for a few drinks, offering additional money if he posed for a photo. After giving David a drink laced with sedatives, Jeffrey found himself not attracted to him, but was afraid David would be angry when he found out he was drugged. As a result, Jeffrey strangled him. He took photos of handling of the body disposal and kept those photos for unknown reasons. Jeffrey stopped killing for 4 months. He met his next victim in February 1991. This victim, his 10th, was 17-year-old Curtis Straughter. Curtis had just lost his job as a nurse and was looking forward to becoming a model and attending college. They met at a bus stop, tragically. This was not the end of Jeffrey's list of victims. Just 2 months later, he met Errol Lindsay, a 19-year-old boy who was also lured by the promise of money to take pictures. The next victim was 31-year-old Tony Hughes. Tony, who had lost his hearing as a child due to medication, was cheerful and sociable. He loved to dance and made friends easily. Tony was last seen on May 24, 1991, at a club. That night, Jeffrey invited him to his house, where he continued his killing spree. Unfortunately, Tony's body was left in Jeffrey's apartment for several days before being dumped in a dumpster on May 26, 1991. A tragic chapter unfolded when Jeffrey met Conorak Synthesophone, a 14-year-old Laotian teenager. Conorak was the younger brother of a previous victim who had escaped from Jeffrey. The situation was heartbreaking. Conorak had accepted money from Jeffrey to help his family, who was struggling financially and faced challenges due to their limited English skills. Conorak had been drugged by Jeffrey. After ensuring that Conorak was unconscious, Jeffrey left to buy alcohol, planning to strangle him upon his return. However, Conorak regained consciousness and escaped from the apartment. He wandered the streets until he encountered 2 girls, who were the nieces of Jeffrey Dahmer's next-door neighbor. The girls saw Conorak, who was injured, and they called 911 for help. The police, along with paramedics, rushed to the scene. When they arrived, they found Conorak lying in the middle of the road. They picked him up and placed him in a nearby building. When they began asking him questions, Jeffrey turned around, claiming that Conorak was his boyfriend, with whom he had just had a fight, and that he had been drinking heavily. The police accepted Jeffrey's explanation. The 2 girls begged the police to check Jeffrey's identification, but they refused. They urged the officers to listen to them. Pointing out the bruises and cuts on Conorak's body, the girls insisted that they knew the boy and that he was definitely a minor. The officers rudely told the girls to be quiet and even threatened to arrest them for trying to help Conorak. Had the officers checked Jeffrey's identification, they would have discovered that he was on mandatory parole for a previous conviction for molesting Conorak's brother. Instead, both officers assisted Jeffrey in taking Conorak back to his apartment, and one officer even placed him on the sofa. Once inside the apartment, the officers detected a foul odor, which Jeffrey explained was from a broken refrigerator filled with rotting meat that he had not disposed of. Surprisingly, the officers did not find anything suspicious. Jeffrey even showed them pictures of Conorak that he had taken earlier. Another alarming detail that the police overlooked was the body of Tony Hughes in the bedroom. The police left the scene, but the two girls called them back to check if they needed to identify themselves as witnesses. Unfortunately, the police dismissed their concerns, claiming it was just a disagreement between two adult partners. When Jeffrey was left alone with Konarak, he decided to inject hydrochloric acid into the boy's head. He did this to create a zombie. He had always dreamed of having a companion who would obey his every command without question. These experiments ultimately led to Konarak's death. Jeffrey then handling of the body. Konarak's, the next victim added to Jeffrey's list, was 20-year-old Matt Turner, whom he met at a bus stop. Matt accepted Jeffrey's offer to travel to Milwaukee for a professional photo shoot at his apartment. Jeffrey drugged, strangled, and handling of the body Matt's. On July 5, 23-year-old Jeremiah Weinberger became Jeffrey's victim. They met at a bar in Chicago, and Jeremiah went to Jeffrey's apartment with the promise of spending the weekend with him. Jeffrey then drugged Jeremiah and injected boiling water into his skull twice, causing him to fall into a coma and die 2 days later. Oliver Lacey, a 23-year-old athlete, accepted an offer for a photo shoot for money and accompanied Jeffrey to his apartment there. Lacey and Jeffrey engage in intimate activities. Just 4 days later, on July 19, Jeffrey lured 25-year-old Joseph Bradehoff to his apartment. Joseph was strangled and laid out on Jeffrey's bed, covered with a sheet. For 2 days, on July 21, Jeffrey began handling of the body Joseph's. On July 22, 1991, Jeffrey approached a group of 3 friends at a bar while they were drinking. He introduced himself as a photographer and paid $100 to anyone to pose for photos. Only one, a 32-year-old homeless man named Tracy Edwards, agreed. Jeffrey invited Tracy to his apartment and mixed him a cocktail, which he offered to all of his victims. However, Tracy, being as smart as he was, noticed a strange taste in the drink and decided not to finish it. Jeffrey then attempted to be intimate with Tracy, but Tracy repeatedly refused. Eventually, Jeffrey handcuffed one of Tracy's hands, leading to a struggle. During the fight, Jeffrey grabbed a knife, but Tracy fought back, hit Jeffrey, and escaped from the apartment. On the street, Tracy spotted a police car and informed the officers about the incident. They accompanied him to Jeffrey's apartment. Jeffrey tried to prevent the police from searching his place, but it was extremely dirty, and a strong stench filled the air. While going through boxes in Jeffrey's apartment, the police discovered gruesome photos of his victims. It was clear that they were dealing with a serial killer. This was the beginning of the end for Jeffrey Dahmer. The police searched the apartment and arrested Jeffrey. Inside the refrigerator, they discovered numerous human body parts. In a container filled with acid, they found more human body parts. They also found photographs that not only revealed the bodies of the victims, but also documented the many abuses Jeffrey had committed against them. Jeffrey felt relieved that he no longer had to hide such a secret that he had kept for so many years. When he realized that he would have to face the consequences of his actions, he chose to confess everything. His confession took 6 weeks to complete and spanned 159 pages, detailing every aspect of his crimes, from his first murder to his last victim. Jeffrey explained that at first, he just wanted to lie next to the men he had kidnapped. But over time, his desires became increasingly horrific. He admitted that the only way to keep his victims with him forever was to kill them. Jeffrey Dahmer claimed that he did not want to kill. Instead, he wanted a zombie-like companion that he could control indefinitely. Psychologists who worked with Jeffrey concluded that his motive was not abuse, but a desire for control. After Jeffrey's detailed confession, the court no longer had to prove his guilt. It only needed to determine his sanity. At the time, Wisconsin did not have the death penalty. If he were found insane, he would have been committed to a mental hospital indefinitely. Although there was a possibility that he could be released in the future, the trial began on January 30, 1992, due to the serious nature of the case. Many security measures were taken in the courtroom. including the installation of bulletproof glass throughout the 2-week trial. Jeffrey sat silently, listening to arguments from both the prosecution and the defense. Jeffrey's defense strategy was simple. They did not try to argue that he was not guilty of murder. Instead, the defense sought to have him hospitalized for treatment. They argued that he needed psychological and psychiatric help, asserting that normal people do not commit such heinous acts. The prosecution, in contrast, argued that, under Wisconsin law, a person who remembers his actions and understands what they have done should be considered sane. A few days later, a verdict was reached. Jeffrey Dahmer was sentenced to 15 consecutive life sentences, plus an additional life sentence for a 1978 murder, bringing the total to 16 life sentences. Jeffrey expressed deep remorse for the pain he had caused the families of his victims and acknowledged their anger toward him. He was then sent to a maximum security prison in Wisconsin. During his time in prison, Jeffrey rediscovered his faith in God. Recalling the times he had gone to church with his grandmother, he asked a local priest to baptize him, and the priest agreed. On July 3, 1994, a fellow inmate, Osvaldo Durruti, attacked Jeffrey, who was hospitalized but survived then. In November of that year, another inmate, Christopher Scarver, who was also serving a life sentence, attacked him. Christopher had been diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia. Christopher disliked Jeffrey, who described himself as religious, a characterization that Christopher found insincere. In November, Christopher, Jeffrey, and another inmate, Jesse Anderson, who was serving time for murdering his wife, cleaned the inmate gym. They were also required to clean the locker room and restrooms used after gym class when they were left unsupervised. Christopher seized the opportunity to carry out his dangerous plan to attack both Jeffrey and Jesse. First, he followed Jeffrey into the locker room, where Jeffrey was cleaning. He took a steel bar from the weight room and struck Jeffrey in the head several times. He then attacked Jesse in the same manner. Afterward, he left the gym and called security. Both Jeffrey and Jesse were taken to the hospital, but Jeffrey died en route. His death was confirmed upon arrival at the hospital. Jesse remained in a coma for 2 days before being taken off life support. In accordance with Jeffrey's wishes, his body was cremated, and his ashes were divided among his parents. When details of Jeffrey's crimes became public, protests erupted, focused on the fact that 2 police officers who handed over a boy named Konarak Synthesomphone to Jeffrey were not prosecuted. The 2 police officers did not check the identity of the boy or Jeffrey and did not search Jeffrey's apartment. After the trial, the 2 police officers involved were suspended from duty. They later appealed the dismissal, and the judge ruled in their favor, and awarding each $55 in compensation after being reinstated. Both officers resumed their careers. Additionally, after the investigation was completed, the building where Jeffrey Dahmer lived was demolished in the hope of helping people forget the horrific events that occurred there. Welcome back to our channel. Today, we'll be diving into a new case, the case of Alcácer girls. This story takes us to a small town called Alcácer, located in Valencia, Spain, with a population of only about 7 people. In the 1990s, it became the center of a horrific case involving 3 high school girls. On November 13, 1992, 4 friends, Antonia Rodriguez, Desiree Hernandez, Miriam Garcia, and another girl made plans to meet after school. Their day started like any other. They attended school and looked forward to spending the evening together. When Miriam arrived at school, she expected her father, Fernando Garcia, to pick her up after classes later. Fernando recalled driving her home in his car. During the ride, Miriam talked about her day, the grades she had received, and her dreams for the future. She was especially excited because she was planning to attend a party with her friends that evening. Fernando was sick with the flu, stayed in bed after bringing Miriam home. The party was scheduled to be held at a club called Cooler in the nearby town of Picassent. The girls planned to meet at the remaining friend's house at around 7 p.m. However, the friend wasn't feeling well and decided not to join them. The other 3 girls were determined to go ahead with their plans. By the time they were ready to leave, it was too late to rely on public transportation, so they couldn't find a bus to take them to the club. Miriam decided to call her father for help, but he was asleep instead. Her mother answered the phone. Miriam persistently asked her mother to have her father drive them to the neighboring town, but her mother refused. She believed it was a bad idea and potentially unsafe. And she also wanted her husband to rest. Miriam's mother insisted that the girls return home because it was already late. Miriam, however, asked if she could stay overnight at a friend's house, suspecting this was just an excuse. Her mother firmly insisted that Miriam come home. Reluctantly, Miriam agreed and promised to be back by curfew. Despite this, the girls were determined not to give up on their plans. They decided to find their own way to the club. At 8 p.m., the three friends began walking toward the club. For these young teenagers, this felt like an important night. It was their first time attending such a party. They had all promised their parents they would return on time. As the night went on, keeping that promise turned out to be much harder than they expected. Miriam was about 30 minutes late returning home, and her mother grew increasingly worried. Panic set in. However, in the early 1990s, the girls did not have cell phones, making contact with them impossible. The uncertainty was overwhelming for the parents. Miriam's mother tried to reassure herself, thinking that perhaps Miriam had been upset, gone to a friend's house, or was avoiding coming home to prevent an argument. Though this explanation felt overly optimistic, it gave her a brief sense of calm. She began calling the parents of all the friends Miriam had planned to meet that day. To her dismay, none of the girls were at home. The other parents were just as alarmed and immediately began searching for clues about where the girls might be. No one had any idea when or where the teenagers had disappeared. The last time Miriam's mother had spoken to her, Miriam was leaving a friend's house. It seemed unlikely that the girls could have gone far, as they had no money and had left all their belongings at home. The parents speculated that the girls might have gotten lost while trying to find transportation. Fernando decided to go to Picasso to look for his daughter. Though deeply worried, Miriam's father tried to reassure himself, believing that his daughter had always been a quiet, responsible girl who avoided trouble and bad influences. He hoped to find her near the club and bring her and her friends back home. Unfortunately, when he arrived, there was no sign of the missing girls. Witnesses at the club could not recall seeing anyone matching their descriptions. Fernando relayed this information to her mother, and the family quickly decided to contact the police. However, the police showed little urgency. They assumed the girls had simply stayed out late at the party, wandered into another club, had too much to drink, or spent the night with friends, and would likely return home soon. The authorities informed that they had to wait at least 24 hours before officially filing a missing persons report. The officers suggested that the teenagers might have a habit of sneaking out, but the parents firmly denied this. All the missing girls were between 14 and 15 years old. Miriam had left all her belongings in her room, clearly intending to return later that night. As she had promised her mother, similar patterns were observed in the other girls' cases. One of them had hastily packed a sports bag with items needed for practice the next day and had assured her parents she would come back early to rest. This behavior was entirely out of character for the girls, which left their families deeply concerned. Despite this, law enforcement remained resolute in their belief that no foul play was involved. Crime rates in the area were very low, making it difficult for anyone to believe the disappearances could be connected to criminal activity. When news of the case became public, everything changed. People in the small town, where most residents knew each other, were deeply shocked and assist in the search. Despite 24 hours passing without any progress from the police, the girls' whereabouts remained unknown. Volunteers formed groups to look for the girls and distributed leaflets with their descriptions. Throughout the town, Miriam's family was especially proactive. Working closely with the police and witnesses, the last person who saw the girls was their friend, who had fallen ill and stayed home instead of going to the party. She explained that the group had no access to transportation, no one to give them a ride, and no money. They had planned to hitchhike if necessary, an idea she strongly opposed. Considering it too dangerous, she tried to dissuade her friends, but feared they might go through with it anyway. Investigators questioned other young people who attended the party, but none of them remembered seeing the missing girls that night. This prompted the police to focus on the shortest route the girls would have taken to reach the party. A classmate of one of the girls stated that on Friday evening, as he was heading home after his final exams, he saw the girls in the city center. They were walking in the opposite direction of the club. When he asked if they were going to the party, they said no. He couldn't remember the exact time, but guessed they were likely heading to their friend's house. Another witness, an older acquaintance, reported seeing the girls a few blocks from their friend's house. He was driving through the area with his girlfriend when he noticed them, although he didn't know the girls well. He offered them a ride. Antonia, Miriam, and Desiree told him they were heading to the nightclub Cooler. Then his car broke down. So he dropped the girls off near an auto repair shop near the nightclub. From there, they likely continued on foot. The area where they were dropped off was near some fields. There were a few buildings around, so the area wasn't entirely deserted. Someone might have seen the girls, and there was hope of identifying another key witness shortly after. A witness came forward. A woman testified that she saw girls matching the description walking past her house. She mentioned noticing a white car with 3 or 4 men inside that stopped near the group. After briefly speaking with the driver, the girls got into the car. However, she couldn't remember the car's make or license plate. Her testimony raised several questions, considering the number of people already in the car. It wasn't clear how the girls could fit into a typical white sedan if there were already 4 occupants. The search effort reached a standstill, and it appeared the police's interest in the case was waning. Just a few days after the rescue operation started, the girls' parents began to fear the case would be abandoned entirely. Faced with this situation, Miriam's parents intensified their efforts to gather community support. They handed out flyers and spread the word through radio, television, and newspapers. By this time, Fernando had put in significantly more effort than law enforcement, however. His dedication sparked mixed reactions. Some accused him of seeking attention or fame amidst the turmoil of his daughter's disappearance. Despite this, he successfully brought national attention to the case and pressured the police to take more decisive action. A month and a half had passed since the girls disappeared, and for the 3 families from Alcácer, New Year's Eve was approaching, a holiday they would have to endure without their daughters. There had been no updates about the girls, and it seemed as though the police had completely stopped the investigation. The parents were trapped in an unimaginable state of anguish and uncertainty. On January 27, about 40 kilometers from where the girls lived, 2 beekeepers went to check on their hives in a remote, rugged area near La Romana. The location was difficult to reach unless someone was already familiar with it. While there, they noticed something unusual, a faint glimmer of light coming from the underbrush. As they approached, they found a patch of disturbed soil with something protruding from it. Upon closer inspection, they realized it was a hand emerging from the loose earth. The hand wore a wristwatch, which had reflected the sunlight and caught their attention. The police were immediately notified of the discovery. Later that day, during an excavation at the site, the bodies of the missing schoolgirls were discovered. All 3 were buried together in a shallow grave, bound with ropes, wrapped in a carpet, and covered with dirt. Shortly afterward, an investigation team was assembled, but its members were inexperienced and unfamiliar with handling such cases. This lack of expertise led to several critical mistakes. The burial site was neither photographed nor properly examined, and it wasn't secured until hours after the police arrived. As a result, crucial evidence may have been trampled, overlooked, or entirely lost. Afterward, authorities concentrated their search on the area surrounding the grave. Among the findings were personal belongings of the beekeepers and several small, isolated cabins. In one of these cabins, a piece of jewelry resembling an earring worn by one of the girls was discovered. Since the bodies were found on the beekeepers' property, their homes were searched thoroughly. Police suspected that these locations might contain items related to the victims. However, initial searches did not turn up anything. The medical examiner identified numerous signs of torture on the bodies of all three victims. The girls had suffered horrific deaths. Two of them, Antonia and Desiree, were found decapitated, while Miriam's body was missing her right hand, which was never recovered. Although bullet wounds were determined to be the cause of death, the bodies also showed multiple stab wounds and evidence of severe beatings. Some of the victims had teeth knocked out. It was clear they had been held captive for an extended period. Bound, subjected to starvation and dehydration, each girl endured brutal abuse and torture over several days, with some abuse continuing even after death. At the burial site, numerous DNA traces were discovered on the carpet, but the forensic technology of the early 1990s was too limited to fully analyze the evidence in and around the grave. Investigators found various unrelated items, fragments of clothing, rope, hairs, bone fragments, scraps of paper, and other debris at the time of the discovery. Fernando was in London, working to raise international awareness about the girls' disappearance. He had planned a press conference the following day to continue the search for the missing schoolgirls. Despite everything, he remained hopeful that the girls might still be found alive. The news of their bodies being discovered was devastating. He immediately boarded the first flight home to be with his family during this tragic time. The extensive media coverage of these events had unintended and troubling consequences for those directly involved when the police informed the families about the girls' deaths. The moment was broadcast live on television. What should have been a private, painful moment was turned into a public spectacle, resembling reality TV. While search efforts were still ongoing, the police quickly identified potential suspects at the burial site. They found fragments of paper that turned out to be part of a patient record from a nearby hospital. This clue led them to a small house near the location where the girls' bodies were discovered. Inside the house, they found an earring, which became a key piece of evidence in the investigation. The suspect was Antonio, who had access to the house and a prior criminal record. However, the authorities could not apprehend Antonio, as he had disappeared, seemingly fleeing, which added to suspicions about his involvement. Forensic analysis determined that more than one person had attacked the girls. Investigators then turned their attention to Antonio's social circle, including his friend Miguel Ricard. Miguel was initially shocked to be under suspicion. Investigators noted that Miguel owned a white Opel Corsa car, and as mentioned earlier, a witness had stated she saw a white car stop next to the girls on the night of their disappearance. During his initial interrogation, Miguel stated that he hadn't seen Antonio in a long time, although they had been friends for years. Miguel said he didn't know Antonio's current whereabouts. He acknowledged that Antonio had psychological issues that could make him dangerous. Investigators suspected that Miguel's statements were an attempt to deflecting attention. Authorities accused Miguel of lying about his location during the girls' disappearance, suspecting he was trying to create a false alibi by claiming he was in prison at the time. Further investigation revealed that Miguel had only been jailed a few weeks after the murders. It remains unclear whether Miguel was genuinely mistaken or deliberately lying. Miguel grew up in a difficult household. His mother died when he was 3 years old, and he was raised by an abusive father. This upbringing led him to experiment with alcohol and banned substance. At 16, Miguel dropped out of school to support himself and began working. He spent some time working on a farm and later, at the age of 20, became a used car salesman. He lived with a girlfriend for several years, and when she became pregnant with their daughter, Miguel joined the Spanish army. After leaving the army, he returned home. At this time, he exhibited domestic violence, which put a strain on his relationship with his girlfriend. They eventually separated, and Miguel moved in with his close friend Antonio. Miguel and Antonio began committing crimes such as theft and stealing cars, which attracted police attention. Although Miguel had no history of violent behavior, Antonio's troubled past raised suspicions. Antonio was born in 1966 in Brazil to a large family that later moved to Spain from a young age. He exhibited a volatile and aggressive temperament, often causing trouble in school and instigating fights. His behavior worsened during his teenage years, as he frequently skipped school and was rumored to carry a weapon. Eventually, Antonio became involved in criminal activities, forming a gang that targeted vulnerable men. The gang would lure their victims to isolated locations under false pretenses, rob them, and blackmail them for extended periods. During this time, Antonio developed addictions to alcohol and banned substance, eventually he becoming involved in banned substance distribution. His sadistic and abusive behavior also extended to his own family, leading them to report him to the police. His mother even obtained a restraining order to protect herself from his aggression. Antonio was eventually convicted of crimes related to banned substance dealing and violence against, receiving a 9-year prison sentence at the time of the murders of 3 schoolgirls. Antonio was on weekend leave from prison due to good behavior. After the murders, Antonio fled. During multiple interrogations, detectives obtained a confession from Miguel, seemingly solving the case. However, Miguel later repeatedly denied the confession, claiming it had been made under pressure and coercion. The guilt of both Antonio and Miguel still needed to be definitively proven. This disagreement caused tensions even among the victims' families. Meanwhile, the case unfolded under intense media scrutiny, gradually becoming a pivotal moment in Spain's legal history. From the beginning, police actions raised serious questions and sparked controversy. Miguel's confession lacked consistency, with his testimony changing each time. Additionally, the detectives' records appeared fragmented, leading many of Miguel's supporters to believe that investigators had manipulated him to obtain the answers they wanted. According to the official prosecution narrative, Miguel and Antonio met on the specified date late that evening. They were driving a white car down a road when they encountered 3 schoolgirls walking toward a club. After stopping near the girls, the latter appeared to feel uneasy. Miguel confessed that Antonio instructed him to help seize the girls and forcefully drag them into the car. The two then drove to a secluded area where they assaulted and abused the victims. They decided to move to a more remote mountainous location near an apiary. There, in an isolated cabin, they continued to torture and abuse the girls for days. Miguel stated in his confession that he tried to persuade Antonio to stop, but claimed Antonio ignored him and coerced him into participating. Miguel asserted that he complied out of fear for his own life. The girls reportedly cried and begged for release, but Antonio struck one of them on the head with a rock to silence her. After a prolonged period of torture, the perpetrators murdered the girls. They wrapped the bodies in a carpet and buried them on the apiary grounds. Miguel later retracted his confessions after consulting a lawyer. When Fernando looked into these allegations, he discovered that many interrogations had been inadequately documented. Additionally, there were no audio or video recordings of Miguel's confessions, leaving investigators to rely solely on written reports. This raised suspicions that something was being hidden throughout the case. Miguel faced significant challenges, including going through 7 different defense attorneys, which caused major delays as the investigation and his detention lasted 4 years. Shortly before the trial, a new lawyer joined the case and had to review over 800 documents, including confessions and expert reports. During this time, advancements in forensic science enabled more detailed DNA analysis. Investigators had collected numerous samples of bodily fluids, hair, and blood during the investigation. However, they could not be fully analyzed with the forensic techniques available in the early 1990s. Now, updated methods made such investigation possible. Just 1 day before the trial, Fernando requested a delay to conduct additional analysis of this evidence. He contacted an independent forensic expert with experience in criminal cases. He quit his job and devoted his life entirely to the investigation, which took a heavy toll on his personal life. His marriage suffered greatly, and his wife later admitted that the tragedy had reduced their relationship to a mere shadow of what it once was. The tragedy also severely impacted Fernando's wife, whose health declined over the years. She battled cancer and ultimately refused a liver transplant, saying it should go to someone who truly wanted to live. By the time the trial began, she had passed away. The case of Alcácer girls undoubtedly became the most high-profile case in Spain's history. A heated confrontation unfolded as the prosecution's version of events was riddled with gaps and inconsistencies. Independent experts were unable to find any evidence linking Antonio or Miguel to the murders of the three schoolgirls. Their only connection to the case appeared to be a cabin near the area where the bodies were discovered and a torn map located close to the burial site. But outside the pit, searches of the apiary cabin and the white car allegedly used by the men revealed no traces of the girls' torture or blood. Considering Miguel's confession, it seemed highly improbable that no physical evidence of the crimes could be found in the house or vehicle. Despite such doubts, the prosecution remained determined to secure a conviction. Meanwhile, Fernando launched his own investigation and unearthed evidence suggesting the involvement of high-ranking officials. Driven by the painful loss of his daughter, he tirelessly sought the truth, openly criticizing the entire investigative process and sparking widespread public debate. He even appeared on television, alleging that the crime might be linked to a criminal network responsible for orchestrating such activities. He accused several prominent figures in Spain, a move that drew significant public attention. However, these allegations came with consequences. Both Fernando and a criminologist assisting him faced legal repercussions for attempting to obstruct the ongoing investigation. Miguel's trial began in mid-1997. By that time, he had already spent 4 years behind bars. He was expected to receive a severe sentence for the crimes he was accused of, despite the lack of concrete evidence. Miguel was convicted of kidnapping, abuse, and murdering the 3 victims, and sentenced to 170 years in prison. In 2010, Miguel appealed to the European Court, which ruled in his favor, stating that the sentence constituted cruel punishment. The European Commission argued that indefinite prison terms could make inmates increasingly uncontrollable and violent toward other prisoners and staff. Miguel was later released in 2013, following a ruling by the Court of Justice of the European Union. As for Antonio, his whereabouts remain unknown. It was suspected that he had attempted to flee the country, although briefly detained in Ireland for traveling without a ticket. He disappeared shortly afterward. Some speculated that he allegedly jumped into the sea off the coast of Ireland to end life. Many believe he successfully escaped abroad, possibly returning to his native Brazil, as he held dual citizenship to this day. Antonio remains on fugitive lists as a prime suspect in the crimes committed against the 3 schoolgirls. The case's resolution and law enforcement's actions remain deeply controversial. Fernando continues to insist that the truth is far more complex than the prosecution has claimed. Samples taken from the carpet and the girl's hair couldn't be matched to any existing profiles in the database. The father believes that Antonio and Miguel likely didn't act alone. More people were likely involved in the crime. However, this truth may now never be revealed. Antonio, who could have helped uncover what really happened, was never found. A statue of the 3 girls was erected in the nearest cemetery where their bodies were buried. Just as in life, the girls remained together even after death. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today, we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Sherry Daly. Sherry Daly grew up in Ventura, California, in a loving and supportive family, known for her friendly attitude and positive outlook. She quickly became one of the most popular girls in school. In her senior year, she began dating Michael Daly, who was admired by many. Their relationship developed quickly, and the couple even decided to get married after graduation. Despite their many positive qualities, Michael was outgoing and sociable, while Sherry was an introverted and reserved young woman who displayed a calm demeanor. In contrast to her boyfriend's lively personality, Michael's personality did not fit in with Sherry's family. However, despite their obvious differences, the couple found a harmonious balance in their relationship. Sherry became more outgoing in social situations, while Michael adopted a calmer approach. Initially, their relationship faced significant opposition from their families, but Sherry was determined to pursue it, and her parents eventually relented. Their doubts were dispelled. When Sherry and Michael introduced each other to their families, Michael gradually won over Sherry's relatives, and seeing Sherry's joy reassured her parents of his good intentions. He showed his charm and made a positive impression. Appearing both intelligent and trustworthy, Michael's serious demeanor charmed Sherry, and her family supported her choice. After graduating from high school, the young couple started their lives together, both working at a local grocery store. However, for Sherry, this was not her ultimate aspiration. She dreamed of saving enough money to open a daycare at home, a goal that aligned with her interest in children. The couple married in 1982 when Sherry was 21, and by the age of 24, she had welcomed 2 sons. Just a year apart, motherhood brought her joy, and her daily routine revolved around taking her sons to school and daycare. Sherry not only took her sons to school, but also cared for several children in the neighborhood, further expanding her nurturing role. Gradually, she was able to quit her grocery store job and devote herself to childcare full-time. This allowed her to fulfill one of her long-cherished dreams of caring for children in her own home. To accommodate her growing responsibilities, she purchased a van, affectionately known to her friends as the local school bus. It seemed like the family had everything they could wish for, and there were no signs of challenges to come. On May 6, 1996, Sherry was scheduled, as usual, to pick up the students and take them home. When her husband returned home, he began receiving calls from worried parents inquiring about Sherry's absence. They were confused, as she had not arrived to pick up the children after school. Michael soon received a call from the school, confirming that his 2 sons had not been picked up either. Prompted by the situation, Michael went to the school, where he learned that Sherry had only been there that morning. Concerned for her safety, he suspected that she might have been in an accident or had encountered some kind of emergency. He began contacting local hospitals, but there were no reports of injuries matching her description. Feeling the urgency of the situation, he then contacted Sherry's parents, who lived about 120 kilometers away. They also had no idea where she was. Therefore, they decided to notify the police and report Sherry missing. The officers went to the couple's home to conduct a routine investigation and quickly realized that something was wrong. They decided to interview the neighbors, but no one had seen Sherry since she had dropped her children off at school that morning. Sherry usually went to the store around 10 a.m. to do her shopping and then returned home to do her chores. However, on May 6th, this routine was interrupted. She did not return by noon. Concerns prompted them to check the route Sherry would typically take, which led the police to the parking lot where she usually parked. There, they discovered her truck, apparently abandoned in a hurry. With the keys still in the ignition, Sherry's identification was found attached to her keychain, and the Mother's Day gifts she had purchased were scattered across the floor of the car. The doors were unlocked, and there was no sign of Sherry inside. The police later attempted to contact Michael, but he was not home, which they found unusual given the circumstances. Sherry was missing. Yet Michael did not seem anxious to hear from her. Furthermore, They learned that Michael had begun selling items that belonged to Sherry. Suggesting that he was not expecting her to return, the police reviewed security footage from both the outdoor parking lot and inside the store. The recordings confirmed that Sherry had gone shopping that morning. Consistent with her usual routine, there was no indication that she was in distress. She was not followed around the store, and no suspicious individuals were seen in the footage. It was evident that something went wrong after she loaded her groceries into her truck. Unfortunately, security cameras did not capture any footage of the parking lot after she approached her car at 9:22 a.m. as the officers discussed the events in the parking lot. A passerby overheard their conversation and approached them. She reported that she had seen a turquoise sedan pull up near Sherry's car earlier that morning. A blonde woman, wearing a brown suit and sunglasses, exited the vehicle after a brief conversation with this woman. The witness saw Sherry being handcuffed and taken away in an unknown direction. The woman who arrested her did not appear to be a police officer, and the vehicle's appearance was unusual. It is difficult to determine the circumstances of her encounter with an apparent plainclothes officer. Police quickly became concerned, noting that it was unusual for police to operate in the city without a marked vehicle or uniform while making an arrest. The entire situation raised alarm bells. One officer, who happened to have attended high school with Sherry, stated that he knew both Sherry and her husband Michael well, and asserted that Sherry did not seem like the type of person who would be so serious as to be handcuffed and taken away, especially since the young couple had no prior legal issues. The witness provided a valuable clue. The police quickly searched the databases of all police stations, hoping to find relevant information regarding Sherry's case. However, they found no such records, indicating that this was not an arrest but a kidnapping. The police initially focused their attention on Michael, but then he provided a credible alibi at the time of the kidnapping. He was working at a grocery store, and several employees confirmed that he was on duty. In addition, security footage was reviewed to further verify his whereabouts. During the initial stages of the interrogation, Michael revealed that he had been in a long-term relationship with a woman named Diana. Surprisingly, he mentioned that he did not know her last name. Michael also did not know her address, but the police were able to obtain a phone number associated with Diana at that time, when cell phones were not yet common. Michael provided his home phone number as a result. He was released after investigating the address associated with the phone number. The police discovered that Diana's full name was Diana Hahn. The address was verified in their database, prompting the police to plan a visit to her home. The police arrived at the house and knocked on the door, although they heard noises from inside. No one answered at first. After a while of waiting, Michael opened the door. Standing behind him was Diana. Michael's attitude aroused suspicion. He appeared indifferent to his wife's disappearance and seemed more concerned about his mistress. The police decided to take both of them to the station for questioning, as they suspected that the situation might be related to a love triangle. It is believed that Sherry may have discovered Michael's affair, which could have led to conflict, either between the couple or involving Diana. Diana had become an integral part of Michael's life. He brought his sons to her home on numerous occasions, allowing them to spend time together as a family. Witnesses stated that Sherry had known about the situation long before her disappearance and had frequent conflicts with both Michael and Diana. Many witnesses confirmed the hostility between Diana and Sherry. Despite this tension, Michael appeared indifferent, which exacerbated the rivalry between the two women. Sherry viewed Diana as a homewrecker and was determined to protect her marriage. She steadfastly refused to consider divorce, believing that their problems were merely a temporary crisis that would eventually resolve itself. Through discussions with Diana and Michael, as well as their relatives, it became clear that Sherry's family had been facing significant challenges for a long time. Observations of Michael's behavior indicated that he treated Sherry more like a servant than a partner. She would wake up at 2 a.m. to prepare meals for him, and even prepared hot water for him. Ensuring he could enjoy a hot bath when he woke up, Sherry complied with many of his requests. But Michael constantly found reasons to criticize her. Sherry's family members knew that Michael was unhappy with Sherry's appearance after giving birth. She dedicated a lot of time and effort to getting back in shape, dieting, exercising, and experimenting with her hairstyles and makeup, all in an attempt to please him. Unfortunately, her efforts never seemed to be enough. As he often insulted her and blamed her, the family dynamic worsened when Michael was transferred to a store in Santa Barbara, his new work schedule, which included night shifts and daytime sleep, added to their stress. After a while, Michael was transferred back, where he met his lover, Diana. They discovered that they had a lot in common, leading to the rapid development of their romantic relationship. Both of their mothers were from Japan, and their fathers had served in the United States Army. Their colleagues knew about the relationship and generally had a negative view of Diana. Her mysterious nature and stern demeanor scared many people. In the months before Sherry's disappearance, Michael often told his wife about a friend named Alex. He said that Alex was struggling after a breakup and that he was being supportive, including visiting Alex overnight. However, the frequent calls to their home were not from Alex, but from Diana, who disguised her voice to sound like a man. It was clear that Michael made no effort to hide his relationship. In fact, he seemed to flaunt it, which easily hurt Sherry and made her worry about his feelings for her. A neighbor recalled that last Christmas, Sherry came to his house in tears. She was alone, knowing that Michael had taken their sons to spend the holidays with Diana, feeling betrayed. Sherry sought comfort from her neighbor. Despite her pain, she had not yet considered divorce. She still hoped to save their relationship and believed she could work things out. However, as her mother later recounted, Sherry had decided to leave Michael and take the children before she went missing. She had no intention of seeking child support, believing she could handle her challenges on her own. The interrogation of Michael and Diana ended with a crucial question. Where was Diana the day Sherry went missing? She claimed to have taken the day off work to go for a long bike ride outside the city. However, her alibi appeared to be weak, as there was no testimony or video evidence to corroborate her story. A call to the police station from a co-worker at Michael's grocery store raised further concerns. The co-worker noted that Diana was an hour late for her shift the day after Sherry went missing. During questioning, Diana had several scratches on her forehead, and her hair almost covered her face. When asked to push her hair aside, it became clear that she was hiding several scratches, which she claimed were from a bicycle accident. However, these looked more like fingernail scratches than the usual injuries from a fall. When the police asked to see her palms, elbows, and knees, areas that are often injured in bicycle accidents, Diana's skin showed no scratches, suggesting that her claim of having fallen off a bicycle was a lie. Despite these contradictions, she stuck to her story. Michael's behavior was equally disturbing. He showed no concern about his wife's disappearance. He did not participate in search efforts and did not attempt to join any groups. He explained that he needed to care for their children during this difficult time. However, this excuse did not seem sincere, especially when he tried to spend time with his mistress, Diana. While leaving the children with his parents, the police are working to gather evidence to charge the suspects. Previously, a witness mentioned that the undercover cop was driving a turquoise car, but she could not remember the license plate number. The police believe that the perpetrators were unlikely to have used their own vehicles and suspect that the car the perpetrator was driving was rented. Therefore, they decided to check local car rental companies. Their investigation revealed that a turquoise Nissan Altima had indeed been rented on the day of Sherry's incident. The police aimed to impound the car, for inspection. But it was at a car wash, although the rental company did not require a thorough cleaning of the interior after each return. The Nissan was in worse condition than usual. Employees reported that the interior was in disarray. The back seat was stained, and the side mirrors were torn at the direction of management. The car was sent for cleaning after the car was returned. The police inspected the interior. Surprisingly, much of the evidence remained intact, despite the cleaning. When they lifted the rear carpet, they discovered a large stain underneath that looked like dried blood. Consequently, the decision was made to seize the car for forensic examination during the inspection. Bloodstains were found in the trunk and on the seats when they cut the upholstery. The foam material of the rear seats was soaked with evidence, and the bloodstains in the car were sent for analysis. The results later confirmed that the blood belonged to Sherry. Additionally, it was determined that Diana was the person who rented the car. Therefore, the police decided to interrogate Diana again. During this interview, Diana maintained her innocence, sticking to her previously fabricated story during the search. The police found a handbag belonging to Diana, which contained a remarkable photograph. This photo was a professional studio picture of Sherry's family, capturing a family gathering with their children. However, two important details stood out. Diana appeared in the photo next to Sherry. As the police unraveled the complexities of the family's relationships, they began to uncover Diana's many intrigues. In Diana's handbag, a piece of paper was found with Sherry's name and her bank account number. Further investigation revealed that Diana had studied and practiced witchcraft. Diana had confided to a colleague about her intention to sacrifice someone on Michael's birthday, which raised significant concerns. Michael's birthday was only a few days after Sherry's murder, making these developments even more suspicious. In this context, Diana expressed a desire to speak to Michael. In response, the police organized a discreet meeting. They agreed to let Michael into the interrogation room. Their conversation was being recorded, and they did not seem to know it. They spoke in a very relaxed manner. The police could clearly hear their discussion, which provided valuable insights into the case. Diana expressed her frustration with Michael, accusing him of putting her in a dangerous situation that could have led to her arrest. She repeatedly questioned him about why he had placed her in these circumstances. The couple was clearly looking for a way out of this complicated situation and was trying to find a means to avoid punishment. Michael then made vague statements and urged Diana to tell the truth to the police, stressing that she had nothing to worry about. They attempted to stage a misleading conversation to distract the police. They had no idea that important information had reached police. Michael was then escorted out of the interrogation room, and the discussion continued with Diana, who was pressed to explain her possession of a piece of paper with the bank account number. In her defense, Diana claimed that Sherry had abandoned the children and that the account was necessary to purchase necessities for them. However, her explanation lacked credibility. The police believed that Diana was lying. After investigations, they learned that Sherry was a good woman. Many of her acquaintances described her as a loving mother to her children, and there was no sign of her mistreating them. It was clear that she was trusted to look after the children of her neighbors and other households, which reinforced the belief that she would not abandon her own children. Despite this, Diana continued to try to portray Sherry in a negative light. The police realized that Diana was involved in Sherry's case, but they felt they did not have enough evidence to arrest her or file charges. Therefore, they allowed her to go home while the investigation continued. The case was widely reported in the media, raising concerns that journalists could play a key role in assisting criminal investigations or obstructing the pursuit of justice. Sherry's disappearance was a popular topic on all news platforms, including newspapers, radio, and television, her photos were displayed prominently throughout the city. Prompting widespread public discussion, the police received numerous calls with tips related to the case. However, many of them were unfounded. Despite this, they focused on identifying credible leads based on the evidence they had. The police decided to share information with the public about a possible connection to someone named Diana as soon as her photo was aired. Calls to the station increased significantly. One notable tip came from a woman working at a local wig shop who recalled that Diana had purchased a chestnut wig a few weeks earlier. Diana made it clear that she intended to look like a police officer to intimidate someone. Further investigation revealed that she had paid for the wig with a check made out to Sherry. Signed in distinctive blue ink, a salesperson from another store contacted the police to report that Diana had visited his establishment around the same time. During this visit, Diana purchased handcuffs and a police badge, which she paid for with a personal check. Additionally, a hardware store employee provided a third report, stating that approximately a week before Sherry was abducted, Diana had also visited the store and purchased an axe. She drew attention with her striking makeup, which was particularly bold and set her apart from the others, although the guest wished to remain anonymous. She paid with a check in her own name, establishing a direct link to the potential crime. The police collected physical evidence and later discovered an axe at Diana's residence, which was sent for forensic testing. Surprisingly, tests found no trace of Diana's blood. Suggesting the axe was not used in the murder, the police determined that Diana had carefully planned Sherry's abduction the day before. She had purchased a brown suit, shoes, superglue, large garbage bags, toiletries, lighter fluid, matches, sunglasses, and other items that could have been instrumental in the abduction. As a result, the police were able to piece together a possible timeline of the events surrounding the abduction. Sherry may not have recognized Diana when she wore the wig and glasses, which could explain why she did not resist during the arrest. However, when they were close together and Sherry got into the rental car, it was clear that she recognized Diana sitting in the back seat. Sherry attempted to escape by screaming and doing her best to block Diana from driving away. During her resistance, Sherry scratched Diana's forehead based on the blood found in the car. It is possible that Sherry was killed shortly afterward in the back seat. Diana was eventually arrested, and it was discovered that she was in possession of a pen containing the same blue ink that was involved in the case. Attention then turned to Michael, as he seemed to have been aware of his mistress Diana's plans, given his suspicious behavior at a press conference. There were indications that he might have been the instigator of the crime. The police suggested that Sherry's husband, Michael, be investigated for possible involvement in the murder. Following this revelation, the police department received numerous calls from drug dealers and people in the escort service industry, all reporting that Michael regularly used drugs and hired escorts. One escort revealed that on the day Sherry went missing, she had met Michael, who had taken her out of town. This information attracted the attention of the police as the investigation progressed. On June 1, 1996, near Kaduna Larga Road, on the edge of a cliff, police discovered women's shoes and sunglasses belonging to Diana. Shortly thereafter, they found the body of a woman. Dental records confirmed that the body belonged to Sherry, who had gone missing. Forensic examinations revealed that Sherry had been stabbed about a dozen times, mostly in the neck and upper chest. A forensic expert determined that a serrated knife was the murder weapon, with multiple stab wounds to Sherry's body indicating a violent and deliberate attack, particularly to the face. This evidence suggested a personal grudge against Sherry after the murder. Sherry's body was dumped outside the city. Worryingly, Michael had been socializing with an escort just meters from where Sherry's body was found. suggesting his possible involvement in the crime. The police gathered enough evidence to charge Michael. Further investigations revealed that Diana had lured Sherry into her car before killing her. Notably, hair from Diana's wig was found on Sherry, and the wig was later recovered. Diana's trial was initially held. With her facing charges of kidnapping and murder, the attorney took a fairly passive approach to defending his client, focusing primarily on minimizing the severity of the sentence by arguing that the murder was not intentional. However, the evidence presented clearly demonstrated that Diana had meticulously planned the attack. After brief deliberation, the jury returned a guilty verdict. Diana Hahn was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. During the hearing, Diana testified against Michael, claiming that he had urged her to kill Sherry. However, Diana's testimony was not the most crucial factor in the prosecution's success. Just before the hearing began, another woman came forward to the police, revealing that she had been in a relationship with Michael shortly before the murder. She stated that he had also urged her to kill his wife, Sherry. According to her account, Michael not only sought to kill his wife, but also requested that it be done in the cruelest way possible. Wishing for Sherry to suffer for a long time before dying, this woman considered his request a joke and refused to comply. The woman then decided to end her relationship with Michael, who was behaving in a troubled manner. After discovering the tragic events that had occurred, she contacted the police. The prosecution presented evidence that Michael's motive for the murder was a desire to avoid a prolonged divorce and custody battle, as well as to secure the financial benefit of Sherry's life insurance policy, from which he had received $50. Meanwhile, Michael's attorney presented a defense, largely arguing that Michael was a victim of circumstances due to Sherry's refusal to file for divorce. Ultimately, Michael Daly was convicted of attempted murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. After Sherry's death, custody of her children was awarded to their grandparents.